the May 18th, 2021 board meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Sugar Grove Village Board to be held as outlined in Public Act 101-0640, which waives the Open Meetings Act requirement in that physical form of elected officials be present to hold a public meeting in the event of the public public health disaster declaration and a determination by the village president. Governor Pritzker issued a statewide disaster declaration on April 30th, 2021, and in response, President Jennifer Conan determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent at this time. We have a roll call.
Trustee Herron.
Here.
Trustee Lindy.
Here.
Trustee Shometh.
Here.
Trustee Walter.
Here.
Trustee White.
Here.
President Conan.
Here. Sean, will you read from the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sean. We have no public hearings. Under appointments and presentation, what I'd like to do is we have reappointments for Planning Commission, Board of Police Commissioners, and Police Protection Board. Thank you. Does anyone have any discussion on those items? On those reappointments? Ryan, any discussion on reappointments or Jamie on reappointments? Okay, here's can I get a motion to reappoint for the Planning Commission, Larry Jones, for the Board of Police Commissioners, John Gable, and for the Police Pension Board, Matt Anastasia?
As stated. Second.
Then a first by Trustee Shometh and a second by Trustee Herron. Roll call, please.
Trustee Shometh.
Aye.
Trustee Herron.
Aye.
Trustee White.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy.
Aye.
Trustee Walter.
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. On the declaration of vacancy and appointment of trustee, for the record, I just wanted to state that how this is handled and how it's done. This is the appointment of the president with consent of the board, and we did discuss it in closed session and came up with a short list, if you will, based on 11 very qualified individuals. And so what I'm asking the board tonight, first of all, do you have any discussion as the appointed person is Matthew Vine? Do you have any discussion on the appointment? Ryan or Jamie, anything? Okay.
Just a couple things. Just that there were a lot of very qualified applicants for this position, which made it difficult. So for me, I think looking at the quality of applicants and the best interest of the board, for me personally, I really appreciated and respected Trustee Montalto's perspective as a member, as a police officer. So one of the biggest things that I try to do for this position is keep that perspective with the size of our budget for the police department and everything that we've got coming forward with our police department as police departments continue to change. And I think that that was one of the biggest reasons why I think Matt Bonnet would be a great position for a great fit for this position.
Thank you. Any other comments? I agree with you wholeheartedly that I did respect the position that Trustee Montalto brought to the board. And Matthew Bonnet is more than qualified. He's a 7-year police officer in the city of Aurora, which is our second largest city in the state of Illinois. Anything that's going to happen in Sugar Grove, he's going to have first-hand experience as to what's coming down before we ever have to make any decisions on it. So I think that's invaluable. Not only that, he's also a new father and a small business owner. He has many relations with elected officials, and I think all of his qualifications are going to suit as well in the village of Sugar Grove. So I'm excited that he's decided to accept. As long as the board accepts, I think we'll have a good team moving forward. So unless there's any other comments, concerns, questions? Okay, all right. So I would ask that I can get a motion to declare the vacancy position that I created and the appointment of trustee Matthew Bonnie. Trustee Harris, second, and Heidi second. Roll call, please, Allison. Lindsay second.
Trustee Heron.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy.
Aye.
Trustee Walter.
Aye.
Trustee White.
Absolutely.
Trustee Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes. Congratulations. That being said, I'd like to execute the oath of office. Thinking that Matt, come on out and watch the screen is the best way to the two of us to come together. We're over here. Is that all right with the ribbon and Laura? I, Matthew Bonnie, having been elected to the office of village trustee in the village of Sugar Grove in the county of Kane, Massachusetts, do solemnly affirm for the Constitution of the United States
Do solemnly affirm that I will support the Constitution
and the Constitution of the State of Virginia, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of village trustee
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of village trustee
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
Keep your seat. Next up, we have Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement and Excellence for Financial Reporting. This is an award that the village has received, 21 consecutive years or 21 years?
I believe it's consecutive.
And this is a great award for Matt Anastasia. He does a fantastic job for the village. We're thrilled to have him on board. And Matt, I don't know if you want to give us any more detail regarding this certificate.
The only thing that this certificate is done through in conjunction with our auditors, Lauterbach and Amon. They do present that and do the blunt of the work, but it is a lot of work trying to get all that information. But it's kind of a conjunction with Lauterbach and Amon and our staff for the 21st year.
I know that we all appreciate your efforts. Like I said, we're very grateful to have you on staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Moving on to public comment, items scheduled for action. This evening we have on the consent agenda approval of the minutes of the May 4th, 2021 village board meeting, approval of the minutes of the May 11th, 2021 special village board meeting, approval of vouchers, approval of the treasurer's report, resolution authorizing employment agreements, resolution approving a professional service agreement with Shopping Design Services. I'm also going to open it up to, we do have discussion items. I know I said for action, but I do realize that the finance overview will be long. So if anybody wants to make a public comment on Brian Holmes Settlers Ridge architecture or the finance overview, now is a great time. So anyway, we do have two public attendees. Do we have any public comments at this time? Okay. Allison, do we have any public comments online? Any raise your hand? Anyone online want to raise your hand if you'd like to make a public comment? Nothing. Okay. We do have a few public comments that came in via email. So Allison will read those now.
So this is from Keith Zach. Is the village not compelled to post requests for qualifications prior to hiring a professional organization? Shop Design has not provided professional services in the past 5 years according to board agendas and minutes. What gives the village the right to hire a firm without advertising for other firms to submit qualifications? This seems very similar to appointing Steve Anderson as a lobbyist without getting additional proposals. Village staff and board are circumventing a process that is designed to protect the residents. Ms. Conan has not been in her seat for a month and already is pushing her agenda without following village and state law. This does not seem to be open and transparent government. The village board should table tonight's topic on shop design and post for RFQ.
Can we address that public comment also? I would like to, can we have Laura address the law and the legality of that comment?
Sure. The Local Government Professional Services Selection Act does only apply to narrow professions and narrow scope of services. This particular the professional service agreement does not fall within any of the defined services of that act. And even if it did, it is well below the statutory threshold of both that act and of the bidding requirements.
Okay, so just for clarification, that public comment. I guess for lack of better words, so thank you. We're moving on to the next public comment.
The next public comment is from Keith Zach again. The word in the neighborhood is that Matt Bonney is being appointed to the vacant village trustee position. Do the other board members know that Mr. Bonney served as Ms. Conan's finance chairman for her campaign? Is this Chicago politics where you do a campaign favor and be rewarded with an appointment? This does not appear to be very transparent, which is a campaign theme for Ms. Conan.
I'd like to address that public comment and just state for the record that I am the only person on any of my financial accounts that I in no way had a chairman to deal with any of that. So I believe that's public record with the election office, the state board of elections, we can look that up. But I am the only name, so again, that comment is just, for lack of a better word, flavors that means nothing, and we have to look at that. It's not that big. So as far as that's concerned, we'll move on to our next public.
The next public comment is from Linda Nab. I would like to commend our village.
I saw Jamie raising his hand. I didn't know.
I'm sorry, Jay, you want to add to that?
I did want to comment. Thank you. I want to, number one, commend the village president for pursuing her agenda so diligently in the first month and not just sitting back idle. You've addressed this position quite honorably, and I think you're doing a great job, President Conan. We all want to move forward very swiftly and diligently in our new roles here, and some people in their current roles, their old roles, and so I want to commend you for doing that within the terms of the law. You're doing a nice job of that. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate it.
From Linda Nab. I would like to commend our village on the process used to fill the board trustee vacancy created by President Conan's recent election win. With so much to accomplish for our communities, it is extremely important to have the right mix of individuals leading the way. We need people who are experienced, knowledgeable, level-headed, and excited to execute the vision for Sugar Grove's future. The election of President Conan has created such positive momentum within Sugar Grove, which is clearly evident by the number of individuals who willingly submitted applications for the trustee position. I do not ever recall having so many people willing to dedicate their time to be a village trustee, and this makes me extremely hopeful for the future of our community. People are finally ready to start engaging with leadership, dedicating their time and efforts towards the greater good of our community. In the past, trustee positions were simply appointed based on the president's recommendation alone. President Conan's process involved an open application available to the public, one focused on relevant experience and specific areas of expertise that would translate to how we would move our community forward and accomplish our specific goals. Board members were equal participants in determining the best fit based on the individual qualifications and skill set, but also the immediate needs of our community and how best to accomplish the tasks at hand. The process was simple, straightforward, and equitable. Anyone who wanted to be a part of the village board under our new leadership with President Conan, had the opportunity to submit an application. It is an amazing way to engage community activism at the local government level, and it produced impressive results. In a community which has had volunteerism issues for the past several years, this indicates positive changes are already happening in Sugar Grove. In closing, I would also like to take a moment to thank the board for their consideration of my own application for village trustee. It was a privilege to be included among the many qualified residents in Sugar Grove that submitted applications. Although I was ultimately not chosen to represent our community in official capacity, I am amazed at all of the wonderful residents that live here and know that we can do fantastic things together. I look forward to helping the village in any way I can. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me for any needs you have. I wish you all the best of luck in your upcoming term.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments at this time online? Please do the raise the hand feature. And no additional public comments. Okay, we'll close that portion. Moving forward on the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes of the May 4, 2021 village board meeting, approval of the minutes of the May 11, 2021 official village board meeting, approval of the vouchers, approval of the treasurer's report, authorizing employment of resolution authorizing employment agreements, resolution approving the professional service agreement with Shopee Design Associates. Would anyone like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Very good. We will move forward. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
First by trustee Herron.
I'll second.
Second by trustee Schultz. Roll call, please.
Trustee Herron,
Aye.
Trustee Shometh,
Aye.
Trustee White,
Aye.
Trustee Walter. Oh, hold on. He's on my phone.
Oh my God.
All right, I unmuted you, Ryan, if you want to unmute yourself.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Lundy
Oh, aye.
and Trustee Bonnie.
Aye.
Motion passes. Nothing under general business, a discussion item. We have the Ryan Home Settlement Bridge architecture. Walter?
Scott Shelton from Ryan Homes on the line, and I'm sure we'll fill all the details, but in summary, since the last meeting, Ryan Homes met with the HOA, and the HOA and Ryan Homes are in complete agreement on how to proceed with the architectural elevations, and I think those are expressed in their letter that they addressed to us. There also was sort of a discussion at the last meeting concerning the alley-loaded lots, and Ryan Holmes informed me that they've reached an agreement with the seller to exclude those lots from their contract, so they're not going to be building on those lots. And respect to the 6 lots that the rear elevations face Gordon Road, Ryan Holmes is proposed to add window trim on the rear elevation and offer a rear covered porch option on those lots. So that's where we're at, and I'll turn the floor over to Scott to go into a little more detail on the changes with the elevations and the other considerations with the HOA.
Scott, if you can hear us, you have the floor.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for having me again. Walter, thank you for the intro. So since our last meeting, we huddled up with the HOA again swiftly. And again, I just want to thank Dominic for his time and working with us. And essentially, really the changes from prior submittal is that in working with the HOA, we agreed that we would install porch rails across the elevations that have front porches. And as we really were looking at some of the alternatives and ways to try to bridge the gap, that became the most easy to execute and consistent across the various elevations, as opposed to trying to go elevation by elevation and address some of the concerns that might have been there. And so between that one and the installing the black aluminum mailboxes to match, and just clarifying that we would indeed do that, where allowed by the postmaster, because ultimately the postmaster will dictate whether there needs to be cluster boxes or some configuration. But when there indeed is a single mailbox or dual mailbox, it would be the black aluminum post and black aluminum box to match what's existing in the community. So those were really the changes made to the elevations, and I think to the satisfaction of the HOA. I'm sure Walter's provided you a copy of the support letter, which reiterates that, amongst the other things that we had already agreed to from our prior meeting.
Thank you for addressing this. I'm glad that we do have a support letter. I did have the opportunity, I think it was last week, to drive down to Yorkville and look at some homes. And one of the issues that obviously I brought back to Walter was the rear elevation for Gordon Road, which I think we've now identified as a lot. The only hesitation I have with this is I appreciate that you're going to put trim on the rear elevation. Is there a way for you to say, okay, we're going to do those 6 lots, if someone wants a ranch, just so that you're not dealing with the same rear elevation, with just a porch on it? I don't know how he told you to that. I mean, you're wording it as an option, so what happens if someone doesn't want to put the rear porch on? Is there the potential to have 6 homes with the same exact rear elevation as facing one road, but be a different home?
I think it's a little bit difficult to hear you, but I know that there was concern on those 7 or 6 lots with the rear elevation, and I had suggested to Walter that, we would either do if customers doesn't select the porch option, which would break up the rear facade, then to put the window trim. And I think if it's more simple, I think there was a concern that, one or the other. I mean, the most simple thing and that we would be fine doing is just agreeing that on any of the elevations, whether ranch or 2-story along that route, would be to put the rear window trim on those. Did that answer your question, or did I not understand your question?
No, it answers part of the question. I think that the window trim of the home should be on all of them, first of all, but because there's no break in the elevation, in my opinion, it's a straight wall unless someone puts a rear porch on. I'm trying to ensure that for those lots that back to Gordon Road that you see, that there should be rear elevation changes. And now it's one thing to do it on the inner lots where it's not noticeable, but on something so prominent on a main road like that, I would like to see different elevation changes. And I know that you can do that if one's a ranch and one's a 2-story, and then the third house down maybe has a porch. I would hope all of them have the window trim. I think it makes a big difference versus the window just being placed up against the siding. But I wasn't sure how we ensure that there are those elevation changes on Gordon Road, other than we'll do our best, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the practical way to do it would be to say something to the effect of, there were 6 lots. Is that as I recall? Would be to say that, during those 6 lots, at least 2 of them would have either a ranch or have a porch option, something that just breaks up so you don't have all 6. And we would just, we would either, make the porch option then standard on a couple of those homes and sell it that way, or, certainly ideally market. Can't force somebody to probably buy a ranch there necessarily, but we would market that as an opportunity to get a ranch in there. And if not, we would make the porch option required on 2 of the homes. And, if they weren't selected, we would include that in the price of the home.
Okay. I think that's a great option. Can you guarantee that you put that trim around on the rear elevation of those 6 homes?
Yes.
Okay, so all rear elevation on those 6 lots will have window trim on the back side. On
Yes.
the rear. Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Jamie, I know you had some questions the last time. I just want to make sure anything is finalized for you.
Well, I think this kind of answers that. I think the correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, if you have a different house, I can't imagine the rear elevation of your house plans are the same on every house because only when you've got the same model home, correct?
That is not what on your bill.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases the rears can be similar. I can't tell you for certain without looking at all the plans whether all the pitches and everything are identical. But I would say that the 2-story homes would have a similar rear facade. So what to the comment was made earlier, that's how we would intend then to break them up.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I mean, I think I don't think that's going to be that bad.
Okay. So that sounds like we're in agreement. If you put rear window trim on all the rear elevations of those 6 lots, you market at least 2 of them with rear porches, and hopefully you sell a ranch in there. And I think that would be enough deviation on those that we could come to an agreement. Unless the board, yeah, I think I'm getting nods over here. Jamie, do you agree? And Brian? I think that was the last thing that really was the rear elevation.
I'm fine with everything the way it's being presented.
Okay. Brian? Did I lose him? Well, let's do this then. If you can't hear, we're not making a decision tonight. We're all in agreement. Let's move forward to the next board meeting under general business. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for all your hard work working with the HFA. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to getting started. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up, everybody get a drink of water. Or Matt should get a drink of water. Let's look at our finance overview.
All right. I think we're ready.
Oh, yep. Allison, trustee White, signing off. I will use that. Thank you.
If I may, Trustee White did spend, I think, almost 2.5 hours with Matt and I talking about financial issues. So even though he can't stay for this portion, he's pretty much heard it all. He's heard it all already.
Yeah, no offense, Matt. I'm on vacation though.
Yeah. No offense taken.
Thank you. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Before Matt gets started, Trustee Walter is saying that he can hear everybody loud and clear, except for us. So everybody online he can hear, so we can maybe speak a little closer to the microphone if we have something to share.
Oh, okay. Can everybody see my screen now? I believe I'm sharing. Hopefully. Yeah. Okay. So at any time, if anybody wants to jump in, ask questions, I'd rather do it as we go. It is going to be a little bit of a longer presentation. Just want to thank everybody for listening and kind of just in going through this and learning a little bit more on the financial side of the village. It is a longer presentation, but I'm trying to get overview, but as much depth as we can as we go through. So As we go through, we're going to kind of go over just a very quick summarization of the fiscal year 21-22 budget, as there are new board members that did not vote on that budget. So we'll incorporate fund balances in there, pension funding, debt limits, and obligations as we go through the budget summarization. We'll get into some potential revenue enhancements that we've discussed at prior board meetings and kind of go through those. And then the last option is some funding opportunities generally relating to the potential for a future village hall. So in total, we have 11 different funds within the village. General fund and your water sewer fund are going to be your main funds, but there are our capital fund, 2 different TIF funds, infrastructure capital fund, a debt service, SSA 10, which is that over by the Jewel area. It's the detention area. There's the water fund, and then there's a water capital fund, a garbage refuse fund, and police pension fund. So to start, we're going to start with the general fund, which would be your major fund. This is where everything is paid out of. And currently, what is on the screen is the summary of that budget from the recently approved fiscal year 21-22 budget. I know it's kind of small. I can zoom in a little bit. So as we go through, the unrestricted fund balance for the projection for fiscal year 21-22 ending is $1.98 million. What that is unrestricted means that's cash on hand that's available for any necessary purposes and has no restrictions. Currently, the village does have a fund policy of 25% reserves, and that is a minimum. That's not a statutory requirement. That is just a village funding policy, which the village board approved. So right now, that reserve policy, 25%, would be $1.4 million, which leaves an excess of about $577,000 above the 25%. So in total, we have currently about a 35% unrestricted fund balance reserve. The reserve balance is generally used for any type of emergencies or cash flow purposes, and that's at the discretion of the board. There's no statutory requirements. It is expected to at times dip below the 25%, just unintentionally due to unforeseen circumstances, or there's intentional approval by the board to dip below, and that's a discussion the board does. So in the fund balance total, if you were to look at an audit, there are restricted funds that would be within the general fund balance. Those are generally going to be monies received through the tax levy ordinance, which have specific purposes. And those purposes are listed as corporate, which is a general fund item, IMRF, police protection, police pension, audit, liability or tort insurance, street lighting, and then Social Security. So however much money is collected on each of those line items per the tax levy that's approved annually, those have to be spent on those specific expenses. And if the money we collected is more than what we've expended in that year, those become restricted funds within the general fund. So generally on the budget, I do show unrestricted fund balance as money that is available to the village as cash on hand. Any questions on general fund? I know that was a very quick overview, but otherwise we can continue to move on. So the next fund that we're going to go over is General Capital Projects Fund. That's Fund 30. 99% of these revenues are derived from transfers made from the general fund for equipment and vehicle replacements. There is a schedule that has set up for all vehicles and all equipment that the village owns as part of the capital. And on an annual basis, there's a transfer made based on that schedule for the different amount needed to fund that replacement based on the useful life. There is a small portion currently transferred from that fund to the 2013 A bond, which is the municipal drive bond, which was incorporated. So there's a little portion of that that is transferred out of that fund into the debt service fund. But here is a snapshot of the summary for that fund from the most recent approved budget. So I know on an annual basis, you're going to see a large fluctuation between changes in fund balance, whether it's a surplus or a deficit. This is going to be depending on what vehicles or equipment to be replaced on that year. And so if we're going to run a deficit, it's because we're having to replace multiple vehicles or equipment in that year. This will change, but a fund balance is reflected to how much money is required to be in that fund to fully fund it. So these monies are dedicated currently for equipment and vehicle replacement, although the funds are just village funds. There's no statutory restrictions on those funds and can be used by the board at discretion. And we're projecting the ending to be $1.8 million for this current year as the fund balance, and the equipment replacement schedule target fund balance, meaning 100% funded for all equipment and vehicles at 1.795. So we are 100% funded if we needed to replace every single vehicle today. We can move to TIF number 1, which is Fund 32. TIF number 1 is the Dugan Road Air Park Drive area TIF district created in 2011. Funds in this are distributed based on increment. Since the TIF was created, when the TIF is created, the base tax rate, it is frozen, and anything above that as taxes and assessments go up, that is considered the increment above the base. So these are enterprise funds, and enterprise funds are funds that do have statutory and legal restrictions. They must be used within that TIF fund that the increment is generated. And since we have 2 TIF districts, if those TIF districts are contiguous, monies can be transferred from one to the other, or vice versa, from 1 to 2 or 2 to 1, and used within each TIF district. So currently, the anticipated ending fund balance for this current upcoming budget year, the one that we are in, is a little over $1 million. There are currently the project that's in process right now is the sanitary sewer extension feasibility study out to Dugan. There are potential future projects that have been discussed as far as utility and road improvements to make the development on the south side of 30 more feasible. TIF 2, that's Fund 33. So this TIF 2 is in portion northeast of the airport and just south of airport, south of Route 30. That was created in 2015. These are also enterprise funds, just like TIF 1. The ending fund balance is anticipated to be $286,000. Currently, there's no ongoing projects or redevelopment agreements. There are potential future projects as well as including in utility and road improvements throughout that district.
Matt, I'm sorry, which TIF is Furry Road part of?
That is TIF 2.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next fund is Infrastructure Capital Projects Funds. That's Fund 35. These are where all the villages, road and infrastructure type of projects are going to be budgeted. Projects such as the MFT road program, local roads, and other road projects that we would receive through grant funding or any type of infrastructure projects. There is a bond payment that is partially paid out of here, which is for the municipal in Galena from 2008. That's the remaining portion of the 2013 A bond, and those do come from the proceeds of the non-home rule sales tax. Here's a quick fund summary from the budget. We are anticipating a fund balance of $3,038,000 for the end of fiscal year 21-22. There are restricted funds within this account and also unrestricted funds. Monies that would be considered restricted based on either statute or ordinances creating those revenue sources would be MFT funds are restricted under MFT programs. We do have current MFT funds in there, which is $296,000. That is our portion of the one-time rebuild capital bill, and those are in there for a larger project due to those projects needing to be bondable. So we are anticipating holding the 6 total payments until we have the full amount to do a larger project for those. So the 296 is 3 payments. We've received 3 so far. We're anticipating 2 more in the current fiscal year, and then the last one at the beginning of fiscal year 22-23. There are other funds that are restricted based on just the sources. Non-home rule sales tax is a restricted fund for infrastructure only, as well as the road maintenance fees that are from the utility bills are restricted due to how those were passed when the fee was approved. Anything outside of that would be unrestricted funds that the board can do what they please with. They are in there for infrastructure projects. And just to kind of give an idea, current earmarked monies, which are restricted funds, we have from last year's ending, we did the $430,000 transfer from the surplus in the general fund, and we have budgeted 150 of that this year for the road engineering. So that does leave 280,000 of actual funds that were restricted and transferred for a purpose last year. There's $30,000 for a utility line burial fee that was paid over 10 years ago. That is still in there as a restricted funds. There's a little over 25,000 based on the remaining funds in Kimball Hill settlement for Settlers Ridge, as well as anticipated 494,000, which is the one-time rebuild. We'll have received 5 of the 6 payments by the end of the year. There will be remaining funds that have future projects that could be used and has been discussed at a board, which is Phase Lane Bridge replacement, which is anticipated over $2.2 million, or Park and 47 traffic signal at $650,000, unless other funding sources are determined or projects are at a higher priority. The next fund is going to be Debt Service Fund. It's Fund 41. This fund is strictly used just to pay bond payments and the registrar fees. So there are funds, the revenues that go into this are transferred from general fund, general capital projects, or the water fund into this fund to pay for it. To get a little bit into debt service and our current debt limit statutorily, it is 8.625% of the village's total EAV. So that obviously will increase and change, could increase or could decrease depending on what the EAV for the village does annually. So currently, with the most current tax year of 2020, the village's legal debt limit is $29,251,255. That is general obligation only. Currently, the village does not have any outstanding general obligation only debt. Everything is an alternative revenue source, so it does not go against the debt limit. So we do have the ability to bond for the total $29 million if needed or wanted. So below, we do have a current listing. There's 4 outstanding debt services. 2 are IEPA loans with a maturity of April 2024 and June of 2025. Those sources are coming from the Water Fund. The 2013 A bond, which has a maturity in December 2026, that's coming from capital revenues and the non-home rule sales tax. And then 2017 is an alternate revenue bond coming in a maturity of November 2028, and that are water and sewer revenues. That was a bond refunded back in October of 2017. The next fund is SSA 10. That is for maintenance of the detention area behind the Jewel and inline stores. This SSA was active in adding property tax to the properties in the shopping center. However, this has not been levied for since 2017. There has been a fund balance in the fund, and the village has been using those funds to maintain for the maintenance rather than additionally taxing those owners. So that has not been levied for 4 years now. As that fund balance goes down, if needed to be levied again, we will. But at the current time, there is a fund balance. All right, your second major fund is going to be Water and Sewer Fund, Fund 50. This will include all water mains, lines, wells, sanitary sewer lines, and lift stations. The village approved a water and sewer rate decrease for 21-22 of 3%. So below is going to be the ending fund balance and fund summary for fiscal year 21-22. The water and sewer does have a similar fund balance reserve policy as the general fund does of 25% of operating expenses rather than total expenses. So in the past few years, we have depleted our fund balance to complete major projects. But what this did not incur any additional long-term debt and debt issuance costs. So for fiscal year ending 22, our anticipated ending unrestricted fund balance is $1.22 million, with the reserve policy of 25% of $1,045,000. So there will be a slight excess of $177,000 within that fund. This, just like the TIF funds, are enterprise funds. They have to be used for specific purposes for water and sewer. They cannot be used just to fund your general fund expenses or any other items. They have to be water and sewer. The next fund is Water and Sewer Capital Fund. This was created in fiscal year 17-18. What I wanted to create was a dedicated fund to transfer money, very similar, almost identical to our general capital projects fund, to dedicate money for vehicle and equipment replacement. And then any type of infrastructure improvement projects that we have planned for the next couple of years to be able, and also the water meter replacement program. It's to put the funds away so that any one year we don't have large increases in our general operating expenses for these large projects. We would have annually been transferring funds away to pay for those projects, to not have fluctuations greatly within our water department and water fund. So these funds that go in here are directly transfers from the water and sewer fund. There are no other types of revenue that goes into this. Oh, all right. Next fund is the refuse fund. That's the garbage. So this is just used for the refuse pickup within the village. The only revenues is money coming in from our utility bills for the garbage. There is a reserve policy of 12.5% of the current operating. Right now we're at about a little over 10% as we did not increase garbage rates about 3 years ago. We left those the same. So we were using those reserves to kind of get those back down to the 12.5%. So we're roughly about 10% operating expenses currently. The last one is police pension fund. This is something that the village does not have too much control over, but we do have to appropriate and budget for this fund. This fund does have its own board that handles all the day-to-day operations. The board is made up of 5 members, 2 active officers, 1 retired, and then 2 village-appointed members. There are 3 sources of revenues that go into here. It's going to be municipal contributions, employee contributions, and investment and interest income. The fund does set its current assumed rate of return, and that is set at 6%. 2 years ago was reduced from 7 to 6. The fiscal year 21-22 employer contribution is $623,000, which is the state mandated minimum contribution. Since fiscal year 2018-19, the minimum contribution increased from $401,000 to $623,000. This had a large reason was the rate of return assumption decreased from 7 to 6% for the actuary, which does increase the contribution that the village would have to contribute. It was about $145,000 for 1 year, up to about a total of $222,000 increase in the 3 years leading up to this current year. Currently, the funding level is at 27.5%, which is a large decrease due to that change in rate of return. It did increase the amount of liability the village would have according to the pension fund actuary. And also there was a statute change for the calculation of how Tier 2 members' benefits were calculated. In 2018, prior to these changes, the village was 46.67% funded. And just for kind of a comparison, the current contribution as a percentage of payroll is 55.94%. And for a comparison of that, the village's contribution rate for IMRF for 2021 is 7.89%. Sugar Grove is still a community that does participate its officers within Social Security. So between Social Security and Medicare, that's an additional 7.65%. The state of Illinois has passed a law for consolidation of police and fire pensions to one individual police pension fund and one fire. This is currently in the process of they're determining boards, staff employees, consultants, etc. The asset transfers are scheduled to begin for police pension fund in October of 21. We have not been notified if that's going to continue, but that is what has been notified. All right, so that covers funds and summaries for the village's budget. Before we move to the next topic, is there any questions so far?
Any questions?
Yeah, I got it. I'm not talking.
Just make sure you're with your.
Okay. Hey, Matt, Mike Shomas, how you doing, bud?
Good.
Hey, on I think I know the answer to this, and I'm blanking out right now. Basically, page 1 or page 2 of your presentation on the general fund. Sorry, the following page. General Capital Projects Fund 30. There is a net change in fund balance that's kind of substantial, and I'm blanking out as far as why that happened. I was sitting in as an attendee on those, so I know it. We're aware of it. So I just need you to refresh my memory.
Yeah. So, are you talking about how we're showing the deficit for the current approved budget of the 331,000?
Yeah. And it looks like it was due to a big delta there in the public works, and I know that's going to vary from year to year from anticipated stuff that's going to happen, but that in particular looked like a rather large jump.
Yeah. So the reason for that is there is the purchase of 2 different trucks, one in the price range of $225,000 and the other is $55,000. So there's about $280,000 in automotive equipment replacement for that fiscal year. That's we're currently in. And the reason for that fluctuation, again, is we try to stabilize the transfers going in, knowing that that fund balance is there so that when we have large purchases, that vehicle or equipment piece is already funded 100%. So that's why there's going to be annually, there will be large fluctuations, whether it's up or down, depending on what needs to be purchased in that current year. But knowing that right now we are 100% funded. So all of these equipments, even though we're going to show a deficit for that fund, those funds are in there to replace that piece of equipment or a vehicle. It's not running a deficit where we don't have the funds. It is there 100% funded.
Okay. All right. That's it.
That was actually faster than I anticipated.
Yeah.
I tried not to slow down.
I think that for the majority of us, we've been through this budget talk for February, March. All right.
I actually thought that there was going to be more questions regarding the state pension fund because of that large delta that came. Being on that board at that point in time when it happened, I'm certainly happy to explain what was going on. But ultimately, we needed to make a sound fiscal decision based on that forecast that really weren't coming to fruition because of the huge amount of money that fund is. You can only put so much into stocks and so much into bonds, right? So we needed a fund based on the amount of money that's in there. We couldn't put enough into the stocks. 7% was never going to happen, right? And you got 75% of the fund in that direction. Getting great returns on that portion of it, but when you're stuck at 2% on 75% of the fund balance, you're never going to hit 7%. So it didn't make sense. So that's the general background there and thought process as far as why that happened. Sorry, Matt, I didn't steal any of your thunder on that, did I?
No, and that's it. It was an overview, so it was. I mean, we could have got into it if there were questions, but yeah, it came down to the realistic stuff, and it is. It's a rate of return is a huge factor into the actuary studies, and that was a large change. So that why there was such a large difference in the liability as well. As you look at the police pension fund audits, actually you'll see, I believe, and it was anywhere from a $3 to a $4 million increase in liability due to that rate of return change, just because that means you're not getting as much. So that's why you saw the large change in funding as well. So I will say that we also started that fund when we transferred from IMRF into that fund. You almost instantly start in a very low funding and huge liability because what was being put into IMRF, you did not get that same equivalent when it was transferred from IMRF into the downstate police pension fund. So when a fund is created, you're almost pretty much at a low level of funding instantly and already has huge liability due to just that fact alone.
Hey, Matt, I know in your report, and you and I have talked about this, where the current percentage of covered payroll is essentially 56%, which is absolutely accurate, but you and I have talked about how that can be somewhat misleading in that if you could talk about the breakdown, the two categories that falls into, I think you understand where I'm going.
Yeah, so it is a very misleading number. It does show how much the covered payroll, meaning here's how much we pay annually in payroll, and here's a percentage of what that payroll is how much our contribution is. And it is very, I would say, a little bit construed, because what you're doing is that is not based on just current active employees. You're also paying for anyone that's a retiree or on disability. So it's a construed number, meaning that $623,000 number is not directly just related to our current active employees. That number is based on all the retirees, anyone on disability, duty disability, or non. So it's kind of an encompassing number. As I'm talking, Brent, I know I'm trying to pull up the explanation that I had expressed to you. So basically, what it is what they're covering is there's tier 1 and tier 2 employees. And I would say, so a current recommendation from the actuary, which was presented, that number for 100% funding at normal cost was $716,000. So of that, the normal cost is how they contributed. So normal costs, and then there's also payment towards an unfunded liability, which is the total liability that fund has. The actual normal cost of $716,000 is actually only $248,686, and that is what's attributed to your active employees. There is an unfunded liability payment of that 716 of $468,000, which is for the unfunded and the retirees and disabilities. So of that, about 65% is attributed to the unfunded liability and retirees. The other 35 is actually the portion that's contributed to active employees.
So Matt, do you have handy in front of you what the percentage would be for essentially current officers, both tier 1 and tier 2, or no? If you don't, that's okay.
So I don't have them broken out in, well, actually, I do. So a tier 2 or a tier 1 member, the normal cost is roughly 25% of pay, which is broken down into 10% from the member and 15% from the village. So right now it's about.
Sorry to interrupt you right there. So I think, and I appreciate your memo. I reviewed it. It's absolutely accurate. So I don't want to come across the criticism, but just looking at it tonight, I don't want anyone to make the mistake to say that, if we hire a police officer, we have to put in 55% of the payroll to cover the pension. A tier 2 officer, whatever you just said, 15%. And that's really in a way comparable to the IMRF. It's still higher, but I think that's a little better apples to apples than thinking it's 55%. So sorry about that long drawn out thing, but I think that's important because I know hiring in tier 1 is a higher rate, and that depends on the people I believe started as police officers.
Right. Yeah, it's based on when they start as a police officer. So I don't have any numbers on tier 2 percentage. They just gave me, so a tier 1 is 15%. A tier 2 is 9%. So that is what the cost would be for essentially hiring a new person, if depending on what tier they are. Tier 1 would be about 15% and tier 2 is about 9%. To compare that to the 7.89 as IMRF, to kind of give you that comparison.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, next topic, our revenue enhancements. So here are items that over the past few years have been discussed at some extent at the board level. So the first one is video gaming cafes. Currently, video gaming cafes are not allowed within the village. I did some fairly extensive research between Northern and Western Illinois of how much additional municipal revenue would receive from these establishments. And I will jump around on my presentation, as I did include a 4-year historical average of a few standalone that are well-known video gaming establishments. So that's meaning that there's strictly a video gaming cafe, not a bar or a restaurant. They are, because they have to provide food and alcohol, but it's not like going to a Buffalo Wild Wings and playing a game, meaning it's just a standalone. So this does include 2020, which we all know has been affected by COVID because it has been shut down, and video gaming was only live for 7 months of the year. So on average, one video gaming cafe could bring an additional anywhere between $17,000 to $33,000 of revenue with minimal additional work to staff. So to kind of jump around,
I'm sorry, Matt, do you know, like, those numbers, do you know how many machines that would be?
yes. So I would say what I have done in my, I guess, presentation, which I'm trying to pull up. Okay, so here it is. So what I've done is, this is 2020. So what I did was break it down by video gaming cafe. So this is about 14 pages in. So I did it by the actual cafe name, where the location is, and if they had multiple establishments within that city, I put that in there. And all of these places have the max terminals, which was 5 up until 2021, I think, and they were able to add 1 extra. So all of them are max establishment of 5 minimum, some in 6 for 2020. So those pages show kind of over the years how these are affected and how much money. This is the municipal portion only. So this is what the municipality would receive annually. And this is an average for each of these types of video gaming cafes. So it does show that average range and different establishments kind of all over. I tried to pick western suburbs, northern, south, anywhere I could find. And knowing these video gaming establishment names, it is a very tough thing to do because they're not by the names of them usually. They're by a DBA. So if a corporation owns it, it's a very specific name. So that kind of gives you a 4-year revenue average for video gaming cafes.
Matt, how many units are in Graham?
In Graham, the one in Sugar Grove, let's see. I believe they have all of them, which would be.
Oh, is that 5?
It is 6 now, and it depends on their classification, because I know that they did increase how many truck stops can have, so I'm not sure how they're considered for the gas station portion. But I can tell you, I'm pulling up that report right now.
I just wanted the board to look at that number from 2019 before COVID hit. Our gas station, that most residents aren't even aware that those gaming machines are in there, and it's producing $25,000 in revenue.
Yeah.
So I think there's a stigma associated with gaming and gaming cafes. I think it's a rental because we have vending machines in our branch and they're like, what? You know, it's like, so unless you're going in there to do it, you don't know, but they are profitable. It doesn't mean because we have it here that it's this stigma, because we're it. So I just wanted to agree with you.
I think they're losing a lot of, they're no longer the shady back room in your old video game rental or video store rental areas, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right?
So I just found that a little enlightening, I guess, when I looked at what one location does in Sugar Grove, that most people wouldn't even know it's happening.
Yeah. So I did find they do have 6 terminals.
Okay.
And through the first 4 months, so there is documentation through April of 2021 of their portion. The village has received $10,000 from grams alone.
In 4 months?
In the first 4 months, yeah, that's January through April.
Is there been any policing concerns that have come up with any of these things?
Not in Sugar Grove and not in the neighboring communities has it become an issue. None that I know of.
I'm sorry. All right, Matt, we're back with you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, it was hard to hear. So there is a small other fee. Currently, there is the village, as a non-home rule, is allowed to issue a $25 per terminal fee, which is similar to an amusement device license like we do for pinball and arcades. We do not impose that fee currently. While there's not a large revenue, there are 23 total terminals within the village, and it would generate $575. Not a huge revenue source, just something that is there as the ability. Okay, second one is recreational cannabis. So the legalization of cannabis sales, there's been discussions around dispensaries within the village. Currently, they're not permitted use. The state has enacted a cannabis excise tax, which is part of the local government distributive fund. Currently, it's at a rate of 11 cents per capita annually. These funds are restricted to use of training, enforcement, and anything related to the additional work for a police department with regards to legalization. The village receives this money whether they have an establishment within the village or not. There are recreational cannabis establishments within the region. Most have imposed a 3% cannabis sales tax on all sales within the municipality. Nearby municipalities have estimated collections for sales of cannabis on the 3% alone of approximately $400,000 to $550,000 annually. At this time, it's still unknown if there's any interest in opening one in Sugar Grove or if there's a permit available with the state. It's just more of a heads up on this is what they're anticipating. That is just the 3% additional as well. There is the normal sales tax of the 1% that we would get from it as well.
Matt, is it fair to expect that as more open, those annual numbers will likely go down to some degree at the existing places?
Yes, they are anticipating. That's why it's kind of a range of 400 to 550,000 is because they're anticipating that as more open, it'll start to spread out. But that's currently where they're anticipating the next year at least.
So what they've collected so far, the ones you've looked at have been towards the higher part of that range, but you're kind of building in a drop number.
Yeah, so what I've seen is in that higher range of the 550 in the current status because there aren't that many. But what is anticipated because I believe the state is opening up more permits that they're anticipating a reduction. Obviously, 400,000 is still a pretty good revenue source, but they are expecting that to decrease as more open in the regions to disperse over where people are having to drive to get that.
I guess I had a question for Walter, I guess. Did you ever get a inquiry on this?
That was recreational cannabis, but when it was first legalized, we were approached by the grow centers, and those type of operations. But we didn't have any locations that satisfy the state requirements at that time. Actually, we haven't done an analysis. Because, we haven't gotten any direction from the board to do so.
Allison, are you aware that we got any contact with those small, not general?
My understanding is the cost model is changing drastically and very quickly for the organizations that are trying to get it set up. So it's really, really tough to predict just through supply and demand economics. Too many growers coming online, bringing the prices way down, or vice versa, depending on other states come online. And with more of the shops opening up. I think I have done a study actually in anticipation of this question coming up on the Meet the Candidates tonight. That I think we have something like 10 within about 45 minute driving radius around Sugarfoot. So, and I don't want to litigate the argument. I know that was done a year or so ago. But I think these are all factors that the board considers would have to really understand. The issue of the growth location is fascinating, right? That's very different. I come from the agricultural industry right now, and it's a buzzy topic as far as that goes.
Is it controversial topic?
Not necessarily for the growers, the farmers. They don't care what they're putting in the ground, or in their very large sheds. They want to make their ground. Right? It's the touchy subject is around selling, distribution, how these organizations, how do they handle cash flow? Like, because banks, you don't want to hold the cash. I've done a lot of studying and research into it. Admittedly, it's an area that I'm still very much on the fence. Frankly.
Have you, within your chief contacts of the communities that do have, distribution centers, whether it be medical or more recreational, are you aware of issues with them?
Other than when they first opened up the project, the additional traffic expanded because of the nuance of it. They can purchase medical cannabis or recreational cannabis. Other than that, it's moved out. There really hasn't been much police activity surrounding it. For the lawful purchases of medical marijuana, a number of agencies around us have been very successful and been very lucrative for everyone. So, no criminal activity that's taken place. We're in tune with most of our neighboring agencies and across the state. Anytime there's something that happens to a recreational establishment, messages get pushed out. There really isn't anything that's occurring across the state, and then have a dedicated police force of the Oklahoma State Police that oversees how and the regulations that are in place, and then make regular visits to these locations to ensure that they're properly adhering to state law. So, from the law enforcement side, there's been minimal to very small amount of any type of criminal activity with the legalization of the marijuana facilities selling in their communities.
All right, that wraps up tonight's discussion. Let's move forward. Water bill and utility tax.
Okay, this is another topic that we've discussed. The village does have the ability to enact a water utility billing tax up to 5%. These would be generated from the tax would be general fund revenues rather than water and sewer. And this is calculated off the water and sewer sales. So an estimated total tax collected based on the last fiscal year would bring in the following additional revenues, obviously depending on the percentages, ranging from $41,000 at 1%, up to $205,000 additional in revenue on 5%. Again, with these presented revenue enhancements, they're merely opportunities and options. It's informational for the board to consider.
I was talking about village hall, police department, and needs, right? We're looking at potential revenue to be able to do some of these projects. One of the things that I advocated for, which was reduction in our utility tax. Certainly do not want to consider that as a revenue source to go on that revenue. So I don't know where the rest of the board falls, but I think that we're trying to generate more revenue with different things that we're going to do. This one truly falls on our. That's just my stuff. I don't know if anybody else has an opinion about it. Please.
Yeah, the consumption tax, generally speaking, right, which is why I kind of like the idea of gaming. If people don't like it, they don't do it, and you don't pay the fee. You really don't have a choice on water and sewer. I would rather grow the village out of growth, bringing in more businesses, more residences, to increase the a solid tax base that way, other than just nickel down. I think this would be a tough goal to climb for the community.
I agree. I think that we're working very, very hard to try to keep our costs down. Proper tax levy, local taxes, arbitrary tax. We hear that already, right? We certainly don't want to make that worse. We're trying to improve the situation for our residents. While that is nice.
Again, merely just options.
Anybody else have any opinion?
No, we need to get on.
Okay.
There's a lot of feedback. Other ones.
No.
I agree. The thing with that, didn't we have a dollar amount with this, like average consumption per household or something like that?
There was.
We talked about this before. So like dollar amount, average dollar amount, not that I'm suggesting that we do that, but in case some sort of emergency, what would that even look like? So for a 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5%, or just 1% to 5%. So there's a range.
I think with the average consumption, I think you guys had average consumption. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it around 5,000 gallons?
Yeah, so on an average bill, based on water and sewer alone, it's about $50 for the usage for consumption on an average for 5,000 gallons. So if you're doing that at a 1%, it's 50 cents. So it's going to go up to cents, up to 5%. So a total of $2.50 on an average household. Obviously that fluctuates, but yeah, I didn't necessarily do breakdown of that for an average bill in this scenario. That would have been more presented if that was something that was considered.
Okay. Yeah, and not considering. I was just.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was they? Okay.
Okay.
All right. So our last, not really a revenue enhancement, but it is going to be an influx in revenues, is the American Rescue Plan. Oh.
Sorry, had bandwidth issues.
Oh, we're good now?
We're good.
Okay. So not necessarily a revenue enhancement, but we are going to be getting additional revenue from the American Rescue Plan. So right now has not changed since the last update in March. It's still $1.22 million. The Treasury released an interim final guidelines on the uses and restrictions of monies on May 10th. So I attached that fact sheet regarding the funds and usages. Currently, the state of Illinois must legally receive the money from the Treasury no later than June. The state then has 60 days to distribute them to municipalities under 50,000 population. But we are aware that the state has already filed for an extension on that. They have up to 3 extensions. So we're hoping to see the money in the next few months, as well as further clarifications on the uses and eligible funds. They are kind of vague. I would say there are 5 main uses for those funds. And those, so I guess 4, but they do talk about, so supporting public health expenditures, so any type of mitigation, PPE, medical expenses, certain public health and safety staff. You can address negative impacts by the public health emergency, which is harm that affects workers, households, small businesses, impacted industries, and the public sector. You can replace lost revenue from the pandemic for government services to the extent that it was viewed from COVID and prior to your last completed fiscal year. So off the top of your head, if you did lose revenues, like I said, video gaming for us was shut down for 5 of the 12 months, so that's technically a loss in revenue. It was eligible to provide premium pay for essential workers. And then the last is to invest in water, sewer, broadband infrastructure. So this is making necessary investments to improve access to clean water, support vital wastewater and stormwater, and to expand broadband internet. Those are the 5 main topics, and as you read through the facts, I know it's 8 pages, so we don't have to go through each and every one of them, but it does say that they're not all encompassing, that there are things that are going to have to be interpreted later, but this is kind of their interim final guidelines, and we're not sure if when or if we'll get a final guideline. I did reach out to the Treasury when they released these, because in the past with the CARES and CURES funding, it was eligible for 100% public safety personnel and benefits. That is not spelled out in these. The answer I got was a generic email that said, "Thanks for reaching us. The interim guidelines are not final. Please refer to them for any questions." So they really didn't give me an answer on that as well. So we're interpreting, I guess, let's not spend the money immediately and wait and hold on to it till we get some final guidelines so that we're not violating any Treasury guidelines, because there are restrictions that are in place, and there's also reporting requirements annually for these to the Treasury. So they are going to be monitoring them. In the past, it wasn't just like personnel where you can provide timesheets and everything to get your money. It's going to be an annual ongoing reporting requirement until we get some clarification on if personnel and public safety is covered again. But these are the guidelines we currently have, and still very leery until obviously we haven't even received money, but to not spend that money immediately. These monies do have a few years until December of 24 to be spent.
And with these, like if we violate this, we have to repay those monies.
That is correct. We would have to owe the money back to the Treasury.
You're going to make sure that we don't do that.
Well, I know that at the county level, Matt, you made Mr. James stuff, but at the county level, every time they made a presentation, it was within a couple of days they changed what the regulations were for.
Right, and that's why we're kind of just waiting for the Treasury to finalize something before just running out and spending it right away.
Let's not write any checks.
Yeah. Well, I think that the problem is everybody was scared to do anything with it, and they were getting pressure to have people get to spending that money, but everybody was scared to spend money because if the rules changed after you've written the check, then you're on the hook. So I think that was a huge problem with the initial rollout of this, or the first one.
Hopefully they learn from that one, so the rules come forward with them.
Let's
It scares me that the state is already filing for extensions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the state's filing for extensions because they're saying that they're not equipped to distribute the money back to the communities as fast because they're trying to determine population sizes because it is a per capita amount. That's what we've heard is why they're filing, because they can't impose any additional restrictions or uses. They are strictly just distributing down to municipalities. So there cannot be any extra rules that the state of Illinois imposes for these funds.
And even though it's kind of two payments, I assume that whatever our per capita is, when we first installment, that's going to be what we get for the second versus the second is going to come after we have a new census. So I think, well, that's what we hope, but I doubt that. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, that is, I think, partially could be why they're waiting on the distribution. I don't know if they're going to be able to wait that long because currently we're still under the assumption the census isn't going to be certified until September 30th of 2021. So I don't think they can wait that long. We'll get 50% of whatever that installment is this year, and then 1 year later, you get the remaining 50%. All right. So I think we've gotten to our last topic. So this is kind of going into funding opportunities for a potential future village hall. It's become apparent that the police department has been busting at the seams for years and needing more space to expand. So initial discussions and options have come down to a relocation of the current administration and finance departments to another building and remodeling current village hall to better fit those needs of the police department. So to further those discussions, I have gotten funding sources and scenarios with our financial consultant, Spear Financial, on seven different funding scenarios for a new village hall. So within each of these scenarios, there is money included to renovate and remodel a current village hall for police department needs in each of these. So in 2015, the village's last estimate of cost from Williams Architect had a $400 per square foot cost for a new village hall. Since this was 6 years ago, for our estimated scenarios, we have used a $450 per square foot cost, with $350,000 in each of these scenarios for the village hall renovation. So scenario one, we're kind of going to go in order of smallest to largest. So scenario one is going to be a complete build out of the 2,900 square foot remaining portion of the 160 South Municipal, as well as remodel this, the current village hall. I need to stop.
No, apparently we're on potty break in the boardroom.
Okay.
Yeah. Can we just take a slight pause because we just lost a couple of board members?
Yes.
Is a chance for all three to drink or anything?
Yeah. I think everybody take a pause.
Oh.
You chat? Yes. Okay. I hope it's good that we're you. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I don't know.
where we got too deep into it. Yeah. No, I'm good. I've got 40% left, but
If you need it,
I've got one.
I'm fully charged, but I mean, I can give you this.
I'm okay if I get it.
I'm just waiting on.
I think we go on longer because of the bottom.
We are back. Well, that may continue. Scenario one.
Okay. So scenario one, as I said, it's the remaining 2,900 square feet of the 160 building, and then again, like I said, it includes 350,000 for remodel of the current village hall to meet police needs. Just for a quick thing, I don't know if I have it open. I thought I did. This is where we're discussing. So if everyone can see, I can't zoom in anymore. So this front building, I don't know if you can see my cursor. That's the 140 building. So that is currently where Mickey Wilson is renting. And what we're talking about 160 is this back building. And it's this left portion of the building is currently not finished. And the rest of the building is finished and leased. So that's the 160 municipal build out that we were discussing.
Did we determine how much square footage in village hall? I really can't remember.
We did, and I'm drawing a blank. Portion of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember, but I think I mentioned last week when we looked at that space down there, you know, we could fit admin and finance in there with virtually no growth. We could not fit the boardroom.
Where?
In the one
In the 160.
across the library, yeah.
We're trying to figure out appropriate space that you're, maybe might be part of the discussion too. The mentality exactly being checked, right? So you don't want to go make an investment in something and then go make an investment in something else you think about. So I know we have your own finances, I certainly don't want to do it. So with that being said, if you can't put a village hall or a boardroom rather in that space, it doesn't fit. It's hard to occupy the space once we give it to the system. Because now he's going to be arguing differently. He's going to have things in here that certainly don't want to make it with your stuff guy. We got a Tuesday night and then reassemble.
No, they got to redo the whole thing for what it is that they need.
If they need their own space, if they don't have one, no. So with that being said, there is not enough room and I wasn't really sure. Dr. I believe you were on the board when this was brought up, maybe you don't remember.
Well, I would say it's been brought up for at least probably 15 years repeatedly.
Well, point being that there's not enough space there. I did walk the space with Jason, and it doesn't feel any larger than what the current situation is here. And I don't even know how much room we have for a conference over there. I mean, you know, honestly, it would be a field trip to go and stand in the space visually, but it's, it absolutely doesn't have, it has no growth potential whatsoever. You're basically just treating spaces, all that. And I don't even know if there's enough room. We think we'll work.
What else is this room used for? And is now the time for that discussion? Well, maybe not. I think we've got.
Probably not in depth, but yeah, a couple of quick things. I mean, mostly it's used for, official village meetings, but we have one conference room. So depending upon what's going on, not last year it hasn't been used, but historically this is used on a regular basis in the conference room. There's more times than you would probably think that this room, the actual conference room, the small little kitchen, were all free and used for meetings because we have nowhere to put people. And the police side is even worse. The police do use this for training. Occasionally you will see, if they haven't had a chance, but it doesn't make sense. You'll see some for mats and equipment kind of in the back of the room. So yeah, they'll try to use the space that's available. This is more than it's worth moving around. Typically, yeah, they'll use it for training purposes. Right. Yeah, and then police use this in the interview room at times. Pretty regularly, there's somebody in here.
Yeah, but some of those larger schedule items, even meetings like this, right? There's large indoors at the library that I can guarantee are being used in. There's the
But you've got the rest of the library is not open, and are they going to open the building?
No, I'm just saying in general. Is there other spaces that could be used for 6 months or 9 months or 18 months, whatever sort of time frame it's going to take to get us where we need to be and ultimate solution, whatever we kind of agree with that's going to look like. In the meantime, where life gets a little ugly for everyone, I've been through multiple facility moves with other employers. Pain in the tuchus.
I don't want to speak. I think that if you have a light at the end of the tunnel, you feel like you're working for something, you can tolerate the inconvenience.
Exactly.
One of the things we've been talking about is the need for more office space. And learning through the COVID situation that there are employees that are working also with a cubicle area and other staff members things that they do while they're in the open space, but they're facing that requirement for somebody to go to the office like wearing a mask and close the door and take their face mask off. So knowing that we're heading down this road in this discussion, I would ask the friends and chief to get together and decide if we can do offices in their space now to alleviate the focus issues, build more offices, but do it in a way that works for chief, knowing he's going to take over the building. So we make some improvements today to start the movement, right? We have carpet that we're talking about this approved in our budget, we have all carpet in place. So before we do that, we're going to make any changes, then we need to make those changes, carpeting is laid down, and really rebuild it. So we are at a time where the board is going to have to make some big decisions on village needs to move this forward. So
Trust me. Yeah, I'm behind it.
I think that the thing is right now, if chief, if we can figure this out, chief is comfortable, we put it on the list and say, we're gonna come to a plan, can we make this work in the interim? It takes us, so much time, 2 years to build it. Is at least there's a project coming, we haven't figured it out yet. But then, we
we had request from Matt online that if you could lean forward to the mic.
Oh, sorry, I'm getting comfortable, man.
Yeah, he said we're too relaxed.
It just gets a little bit harder as you lean back.
The 160 building.
Yeah.
The lease for the 160 building or leases, is that 2 or 4 years?
One is 3 years, 8 months, probably. I know the one.
Yeah, we talked about it. Matt, do you have that in front of you, the lease remaining on the 3 leases?
You just signed a new lease for a 1 year extension.
Yeah.
Yes, please hold.
I remember
Sorry, I was just going to say, so for White Law, there's until 24, the end of 24. Same with the therapy. They both did renewals on those, so those are all both through December of 24. The current Modern Woodman Fraternal Financial Suite is a year by year, so it's through the end of this year.
Yeah, but Matt, and I don't know that you have it in front of you, I think with Modern Woodman, they have the right to do it another year after that. I think they have the unilateral option.
Correct.
And
yeah.
I don't know the Source Therapeutic or the law offices, I believe they also, I think, have an option to extend. So we can't say for sure when any or all of them do. I guess we can play the worst case if they all extend it to the full extent.
Yeah, but we need to hold that option. So
The way the leases are written, they're their option. It's the tenant's option to extend it with an increased lease rate.
what I was getting at is the intent when we purchased that property was for a village hall, right? Because it was a extremely discounted price from what it would have been a few years prior. We've got 2 buildings and there's another pad that holds a 2-story building.
Yes, there's 3 pads over there. So at the time, some of the concepts were that at the time, the 140 building was half finished in shape. It had been medical offices that were no longer being used. And then the 160 building, I believe at the time of purchase, if I remember correctly, I think there was a tenant in there. I can't remember if they were still in there, they don't even not in yet. But they were not in there very long. So I think at the time of the initial purpose, there was discussion about turning the 140 building to a village hall space. And while that similar type debate we're having now, we had a potential tenant that was interested in the whole building, so we did that. And then we remodeled in the 160 because the half that it's finished was for a single user. And part of it all along too was it was 2 buildings. It was to use really the 160 as some type of incubator space. That was part of the concept there as well. I think, and I don't mean to put words in my mouth, I'm trying to understand is what you're driving at. Is there an interim solution that's not double spending money to move admin and finance out of here for an interim period to let police take over sooner while the longer term village hall solution is found?
correct.
And I'm not saying this works, but I think that the question maybe is, if we didn't spend money on 160 to move admin and financing for a short transition period, is that money that's wasted or double spent? Or if we do it in such a way that works for us and then it's leasable, truly leasable space immediately after, I think might be one of the ideas. I don't know if it's viable or not. Right. I'm not suggesting that it is. But I think if I'm understanding you correctly, you absolutely appreciate the police needs and you're trying to brainstorm ways to get them more space quicker rather than waiting.
Yeah.
We shall take the short term.
Well,
Do this last and then
just 2 at a time is all it is.
we don't need the social distancing.
And so what I'm also wondering is, as we see these presentations, we see the purchase property line item down here. If building new is if we build over there as a temporary, and we decide to build a new, should we hold on to that? Are we professional landlords, or should we then use that as partially a funding source to build what we need? Because if that's not the intent of that anymore, move it.
Are you jumping ahead in Matt's presentation? No, that is one of the questions, is that to say, yes, if we're not going to use that space for village purposes, is that something we would put on the market? And, certainly I don't think that there's an inherent desire of the village to be landlords. That said, I think there's also, certainly not in the real estate business or able to predict the future. I don't know if right now, if someone would characterize the value of that space at a fair or typical market value. I don't know if that market's up or down or where it is. I think that, certainly if there was a consideration to sell it, part of that we would want to try to do a review, say, okay, what is a fair market price today? And like anybody, I don't think the village would have to weigh if the market is near the bottom. Is that really when you want to sell? You may say, yes, that is appropriate in type circumstance. But, yeah, I think I would say sitting here, the only reason we would really want to be a long-term landlord would be if we really did pursue that idea of incubator space, which is really a different format than what we're currently doing over there, in particular in the Massachusetts building.
I think that if you outfit that building and fix that building, that is totally undone, right? That's prevailing wage, what it's going to cost the village to fix that, and then you organize temporarily, then we sell the building, we're losing money, yes, it's cash flow. Versus even if you decided to sell that building, the way it is unfinished, if you were you're going to build out that other side a little much cheaper than the village ever would. Correct. And you're just, I guess that's like your village rental space, if you will. We move over there if you want to do that. We lose money on the investment on the sell, or we keep the investment and use it as a green. So that's the real thing that confuses me, because I do believe we will lose money if we go down and sell.
I think part of what we're hoping to do tonight, and I know Matt wants to go through the other scenarios, is it is that chicken and egg argument in many ways. But part of it is, okay, well, how can you really think about how large of a space you want to build, where you want to locate it, the cost, and all that, so you know more, and you're comfortable with taking on, potentially debt in whatever form, or depending upon what it is. That I do believe that will influence the discussion to have a good understanding of, okay, that's the cheapest option. It certainly has a lot of limitations. And as you go through the other ones up to the 10,000 square foot that's presented, certainly if, depending upon where it's located, and if, leasable space is part of it in terms of making it larger, that cost will go up. Well, you may be okay with that if you know how you're going to pay for it. But you may say, oh, we thought that that's really not fiscally responsible.
Okay, then so I need a question to you, ma'am. We're not there yet. So I'm going to let you, I know. My brain says, tell us what the most expensive item is, right? Can we afford it? Do we need it? And back yourself down versus trying to slowly say, well, we need this, and we need this, and go to the bottom up. That's just the way we're going. We need a top number, and we're going.
The place we want to be is by the time it comes that we finally build, what we think is an ultimate golden palace, and we take residence of it, and it's already too small.
Right. That's great. So, all right. So, Matt, let's have you continue down we can see the scenarios. I think everybody's looking at scenario 2. We're purchasing properties, basically 6,000, 8,000, 10,000 square feet.
Do you want to jump out?
I do. We can see those numbers, so I'm not trying to.
Okay, and obviously based on the discussions, if that changes, then there's more than 10,000 square feet. Obviously that just goes up. So this is just a starting point until there's more discussion on what we anticipate we need. So I have attached those amortization schedules from Sphere Financial for each of these scenarios. We don't have to go individually line by line, but as an overview, you can see how much that annual debt service will cost us. So that's going to range anywhere from $105,000 a year to $365,000 a year based on these current estimates. It's not tough if we need to change.
But is that debt service range based on 100% financing?
That is correct. So yeah, that would be that we finance the total amount. But if there are funds that are being used from other sources to kind of as a down payment or whatever you want to call it to reduce those, yes, that's a full financing option, not anything if we're putting money into it. So I can go through the debt service if people have questions on it, or do you want me to just kind of explain one of the scenarios?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, let me guess, worst case scenario, you're saying $365,000, financing 100% of that. Where is that money coming from?
Right. Yeah. So if you're looking at the most expensive option, $364,000, $365,000 annually. The only one that I do want to show you is there is that last option, which does give you a scenario where it's showing a structure where the payments will be staggered depending on how we have our current debt service schedules. So what this does is it actually is set up to, this scenario is set up to have a lower payment as we still have the 2013 A bond. And then as that falls off, the payment does increase in those years. So it kind of, it stabilizes your debt service payments so that you're not having a huge amount. If you want to do that, it's just to show you that there is different ways you can structure the bonds and debt service payments around your situation. So that's all that was to do, is just to show you that it doesn't have to be this flat dollar amount. It can change and be structured differently depending on our needs as we go through. So that's that. I will get back to how do we pay for it now.
All right, I'm building a big one. I need $365,000 a year. How am I doing it?
All right. So the first topic that we can discuss on funding option is the water and sewer fund. The majority of actual finance currently, we deal with utility billing 100% of the time, and that's what a majority of our staff does, and even some of the administration staff. We all work together for utility billing. So it is reasonable to allocate 50% of the debt service payments from the water and sewer fund, which would leave 50% debt service payments to be coming from general fund or other funds. So right off the top, it would take the 365 that we need from the debt service, and the general fund obligation would be down to in the $180,000 range on an annual basis.
So, Matt, I'm going to interrupt again. So I understand that sounds really easy, but is the water and sewer fund able to take on that additional debt?
It is. It would not be needed to increase or anything for water and sewer fund to do that debt. We do have debt that will be falling off as well in the water and sewer fund.
Okay.
That's why I did that previously. There's 2 bonds that are falling off in the next 2 years.
Yeah, so we. So yeah.
Sorry, Matt, real quick here. Aren't we looking at some pretty substantial expenses coming our way with the water and sewer system? And
Well, don't answer Matt, I guess. Matt, in the 3, 5 year, or 3 years going out, you have water sewer projects that planned and funded, if you will.
Yeah, so the one major one is the completion of the Dugan Woods water main replacement, which is, we did that. We actually, in the current budget, have budgeted to transfer $850,000 to that water infrastructure capital fund for that project, and that would be half of it, and it is budgeted for next year as well to do that same thing so that it is a fully funded project within the current budget.
We just had a huge, right? So I say huge. We just had a very large increase because the water rate, that's why we dropped the water rate. So because so many people were home during COVID, I don't have the exact number. What was it, $600,000 additional revenue last year. So that jumped us up because we were talking about a 4-year plan to replace, I thought, Bay Lane, and then this increased revenue last year obviously brought us closer to, well, I think we were talking about construction in 23.
Right.
Engineering in 22.
Engineering this year
And
and
construction.
engineering this year and then construction the following.
So it's coming a lot faster than.
Okay.
Based on, additional revenue too. But this doesn't even take into account the fact that those bonds are dropping off.
So to just make sure I understand, we're going to be paying off some debt in the next couple of years. That total together right now about $350,000 a year.
So yeah, currently we have that, and then we also actually this past fiscal year paid off a bond. So one did expire already this last year, which was $320,000 itself.
Okay, so theoretically, we're ultimately neutral as far as the taxpayers are concerned in this model.
It does not require.
Levies.
Yeah. Walking it through right there, that was answering the 50% out of the water and sewers. We now have to say, how do we deal with the remaining 182,500 annual debt service on the general fund?
Okay.
And that 50% from the water fund does not require any type of increase in the water rates to do. So now we're going to kind of address how do we get to that other 50% for the general fund without affecting any fees or increases in taxes. So again, this is a discussion that we had started in the beginning with just cash on hand. And this can be used with the above the 25% fund reserve policy. There is about $577,000 currently in the general fund that is above that 25%. The reserve policy also is not law or statute that the village must follow. Therefore, all of those unrestricted are available to be used if the village board was wanting to do that. However, the reserve policy and balance do help with village bond ratings, so it is not recommended to go use it all just for that, but it is that ability. It's not a restricted statute that makes you do that. But there is $577,000 anticipated above the 25% available of just cash on hand. The next one is we will see an increase in revenue from the census. So we're anticipating a full year in 22-23 of the new census numbers from the local government distributive fund, which is the 2020 population increase. The current population that's estimated, which is from CMAP, and that's how they use the per capita for CARES and CURES funding, is estimating us at 9,888. Right now, we are at a population of 8,997. So the increase in that, based on the current IML estimate on a per capita basis, which is $155.40 per capita, which was the most recent update in February of 2021, this would equate to an additional $138,461 in revenue annually. So then the next option is expense reallocation. So currently the village does pay for annual salt road program out of the general fund. Salt purchases are an eligible MFT expense that can be reallocated from the general fund to the MFT account. With the village currently using MFT funds for all the road program, this would reduce the current road program available for MFT. However, the 2013 A bond is being paid by non-home rule sales tax, which can only be used for infrastructure bonds or infrastructure projects. So this will expire in December of 2025, creating an excess of funds of about $650,000 currently in that infrastructure road fund. In this scenario, that's where that staggering payments showed that payments lower in the beginning and increasing in the future is structured around the expiration of that bond. So shifting that current expense from the salt from general to MFT would free up an additional about $200,000+ in the general fund to pay for this general fund annual debt service obligation. So in order to not reduce the road program available funds, the debt service payment could be structured to have a lower annual payment in the first 4 years and then increasing in year 5 when the 2013 bond matures. That will free up the non-home rule sales tax funds. So this would increase the available funds for the road program by an estimated $400,000 in 2026, all while moving the salt purchase to MFT as well. The next option is other fund balances. We had discussed this as we went through about non-restricted funds within General Capital Projects Fund and infrastructure. While they are internally restricted, they are not restricted statutorily by the board. That General Capital Projects Fund does annually transfer money for vehicle and equipment. These are a great resource to have, and those funds are available to the board, though, as they see fit. If they are used, though, you have to understand that annually those vehicle and equipment replacements now will be general fund budget amount items. So again, this is anticipating that we're going to be fully funded by the end of the year, and that was discussed. So then the second option, again, is the infrastructure capital. So these are primarily for infrastructure with some of those limited and restricted funds. The anticipated at the end is $3 million, but we are anticipating about $2.2 million outside of all those restricted funds. Those are cash on hand that is available. Again, knowing though that there are future projects that could be used for those, as well as the equipment and replacement would be a general fund budgeted item if we were to use those funds. The last one is any of those new revenue enhancements or new ones that we have discussed as options to realize those new revenues for video gaming, recreational, cannabis, water, utility tax, or any other sources that could be pledged.
I'm just going to speak for everyone because mine is how long. But so I'm sure some things that we don't want to do, right? So we do not want to take money away from the road program. Okay, everybody's giving us some that, so we don't want to do that. What you get? What'd you get? So Matt, I think the board wouldn't want to do that. I know that right now, everybody understands too, and I know for the board, we currently budget at 50% for replacement, and then typically every single year we've been able to fund that at 100%. So we budget at 50% with vehicle replacement.
Oh, okay.
So every year we're budgeting at 50%, but we're able to put in 100% because we don't spend, because there's additional revenue, whatever, and then we fund at 100%. So I don't think anybody wants to, I don't want to be hurt. I wouldn't want to, stop that savings plan if we will. So I don't know where everybody else falls on that. I want to make sure that we're not, you work, man, you could probably speak to it, right? You work in a municipality where all these vehicles are paid for out of the general fund. We're in a place right now where we're in great shape. I don't know if we want that, but I don't know if we want to stay on that. I don't want to speak to you.
If there's a catastrophic problem with a major piece of equipment, we get hit. $250,000 purchase that needs to be made for whatever the reason is.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything that's going to mess. In my humble opinion,
I agree.
would not want to do anything that's going to mess with that standing. I asked a question about sewer and water projects. Is there something coming up by way of roads or major road projects? I know there was a discussion on one of the things about a bridge. Yeah, but I'm just thinking, as I'm driving around today, I'm seeing all the road grading that's going on, and curb repair and that sort of stuff. And sort of makes you think sometimes we're, when it comes to roads, you're just, okay, let's just do this to get us through the next 3 years. But eventually we got to,
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So,
Hey, Matt, so with the increased revenue expenses, the money that you showed in here, 138,000 annually, that's money that goes into the general fund. Does the census also bring us additional MMP money?
It does.
And do you have an estimate on that number? I don't know if it's significant, but was it in here and I missed it? I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't in there. I didn't address it just because it wasn't general fund revenues. I don't have that number in front of me. I can get that.
But I think, Matt, so within the road fund, obviously, we'll continue to get MFP dollars. That will go up a little bit. We do have I forget what we're calling it, the monthly fee that continues to go into that fund. And then I think you talked about the non-home rule sales tax during this presentation, that line is coming here its end, which frees up additional infrastructure money that can go toward that as well.
Correct.
So would you say to the board that we are in good shape to take on a project without hurting any of our citizens, depleting any services to residents, and without direct tax increase to our residents?
Yes, I would say that. There is enough fund reserve to do that if there's something major that happens. Obviously, a bridge is probably one of the largest expenses that we would ever have. But as far as road programs, yes, that $3 million in that fund is used for those types of projects or issues that would come up. So that actual fund balance that I was saying, the $3 million, that's in the infrastructure fund anticipated for the end of this year. Of those that are not restricted to just infrastructure is 2.2 million. So there is funds that are specifically restricted that have to be used on road infrastructure projects. The remaining funds are in there as internal restrictions for infrastructure projects, but are not required and restricted to be used for them. That's what it's there for, is if we do have large projects that need to be completed.
And Matt, I believe in your memo, we talked about internally, reserving that, if you will, for that phase lane bridge replacement, as well as a village portion eventually toward the traffic signal.
That's correct.
Well, and maybe bigger spot.
Great.
State dollars.
So do you have anything else on the page?
Well, I haven't, I know.
Yeah.
I got all sorts of it.
Matt, you got the simple answer?
I'm sorry, it was hard to, on what?
On how we pay for our new village hall.
Well, before you answer that, I do have a question. Now, just so the board knows, one of the concepts and what I came up with was the need to generate commercial business in our village, to generate more revenue. So if we need to make an investment on ourselves, why can't that investment turn into something, whether it's additional revenue? Because we're going to go to the village hall, it's not going to produce an investment, right? Which is drained on our budget, and it's fine, and we do the village needs, but how do we take that and then create an opportunity to generate revenue? So obviously in the campaign, I bring it on that concept where you can build it with retail space that means Matt and I had a one-off conversation recently that ultimately changes your interest rate based on. So I don't know if you have more information for us on that.
So I don't have more information on that outside of what we had discussed, which for the board, essentially, if you do have private use and it's not public use, it does change portions of your bond to be taxable, which does increase your interest rate and your issuance costs. Now, that all just depends. Again, I can't give an estimate because that will depend on how much percentage of that bond is going towards private. So I don't have any information until there's more information on what we're building, but it can change portions of that bond to be taxable because it's going to be used for private use rather than public use of just the village hall.
So even if the village hall has a large atrium that might have a cafeteria or a bistro or a coffee shop or a gift shop or whatever that is, right? Because wouldn't it be great to have a nice communal area for people to come in and, you know, spend money while they're there? Would that be considered private space, or does it have to be a storefront?
If it's not going to be a portion of the village, it's considered private. So if we're not going to be in the business of hiring people to work for the village to run a bistro or a coffee shop, it's going to be considered private.
So a couple of things. So the concept of at least in my mind, I want to paint a picture. I wish I could show a picture of what I hope that it would look like, and I don't know if I can tell you guys on that concept. But you could have a village hall, and we could hire a second and third floor, and you can still have public access where you're paying the bills. You're still coming in and paying the bills. And that might be the center portion of our building, but then there's spaces underneath on either side for rental space. But it looks like, if you think about Garden and Elmore, you have buildings that are connected, they have different facades. Whereas ours would be kind of like around the town center with a green space, concert, and we would be a building, right? The whole floor, how to do it is the retail space underneath. If we can, ideally, do that. If not, worst case scenario, we're still part of the town center, making a capital investment in the town center because the traffic is developed. So right now, when we're talking in our separate meetings with our recruiting firm, we brought that up. Correct me if I'm wrong, Walter, and we'll bring that conversation as well. It seemed like he was intrigued by, the village wants to make an investment in this project, not in the overall thing, right? We're not doing everything. We're building a portion. We're a user. We're a portion of our town center. Yeah. But it's an investment that's being used in the project to then get other people to marry along us. So we are building this town center with shop and dining and restaurant. And so it's a whole concept with residential. There is a current landowner that is presented to the board of the town, Ron. He's been talking about the villages of Florida and presenting the town center concept on his land with residential. He's still around. Brett and I are reading him on Friday. It's in the center property on Selena, right across from Woodrum Point. So that swath of land from 47 all the way to 56. It's all farmland. 47 in Selena, all the way to 56 towards Upper Street. It's all vacant. He's the middle section. He owns 120 acres.
Directly south of Windsor Point, just consider Windsor Point Square and go south of the Got it.
So we could do, so I guess as we talk about this, right, we need more information for it. Before we make a decision, we have building on property over here by the airport. We have the ability to build a building property around 160, and then we have an opportunity to take our investment and turn it into a community-based project that we're not funding. We're just a user in the whole scheme thing, but we are using and starting something. So that is a working concept. So lots of process as to what our options are. I don't want to say tons of yes, we'll figure this out, but honestly, this is always in the back of our mind, right? How we don't want to. So, and the other thing that I think is intriguing is before we had Ron Cole coming to us, working with developers, and having his own conversations between the village, and now to a certain extent, he's got us as a partner saying, this is what we want here. We're working with our recruiter to bring businesses to his property. It's not just him going to find them. He has the village support to help facilitate this so that he can develop the product. We're not going to pay for it. We're just one project. We'll see with it. But we are the ability to help him make the product. So, something to do about
Big time.
No, all good.
But I got a great picture of what I would love. What I feel the community wants here. Still here, we don't want fast food, which we will get more fast food in the nature. We don't want, we don't want to look like a strip mall. Okay? This is a unique opportunity to design it the way we want to. Spoken as the logo about what it looks like and feels like. So he's got a great eye. He's had on the same vision for years, and he said that's why I put on the same vision. What it looks like and feels like. So our community, ultimately, we all need our residents to go to be able to go to the same shop. How do we get those residents? And it has to be different because they already have. It's a double-edged sword. We're in a unique situation because we get to create it. Getting to create is also very different.
Those things that the residents want, like more sit-down restaurants and those sorts of things, they ain't going to come until there's a destination, right? The restaurants don't bring the destination. The destination brings the restaurants, brings the hotels, brings the other sort of things that I think people are desirous of within the community. And it's something that I've been mulling over quite some time. What is the gotcha? Bring people, not only keep people here, keep them from driving out, but what's going to bring people here. I think we've got some really great resources within this community that I think we need to talk about developing and showing off more. We've got an insane amount of green space.
Well, we do, right, Walter?
The forest preserves alone, like smack in the middle of town, running all the way through there, and some wonderful and hard to take a walk.
I don't want to steal the thunder from trustee report, but one of the things that we will talk about when we talk about another committee for the community and the town center committee. And Tony Special, I have already shared ideas with me, because he knows I've talked to Tony a lot about what's going on and staff about it. I can't take credit for it. It's that, we have to build a detention basin in this property. And so he shot me a picture a week ago or so with paddle.
What are these people?
He said, so we do a beautiful, and so this is the collaboration that is going to make it happen versus one guy trying to sell his property to a developer. It's the use of the detention basin to generate more revenue in an activity for people to come to. So there's a lot to this. The village hall is one small part, but if we can integrate that into this property, I think we can get this whole project right. So.
It's a long time to get us there. Yeah.
I got 4 years.
Yeah.
That's all I was here. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
We do a little more, Matt.
Yeah. We can go down front.
All right, Matt, follow me here, see if that make any sense, because you know how I run straight sometimes. So you got me down to, if I'm understanding correctly, $182,500 annual payment. So if I use
Sorry, out of the general?
out of the general,
Okay.
so if I use the 565,000, if you will, excess above the general fund reserve is my down payment. That reduces, instead of the 2.65 million that I was financing out of the general fund, reduces it down to roughly 2.1. And then my armchair math over here, and I know it's not a straight ratio, but I think that would reduce the annual payment from, that 182,500 down to somewhere between 140 and 145,000 in that ballpark. That sound reasonable?
Sounds reasonable, yes.
And then essentially, if you took the census dollars, 138,000, within very region, we're paid for. The concern I want to raise to the board is that's under the assumption that the 565 can go to that effort, and that the 138,000 additional census money can go to that effort. I'm not saying it can't at all. I'm just saying that there is funds. You could pay for this. I think what we're going to hear over the next couple of weeks, and I'm not saying they're going to tell you anything that's going to make you think something else is a higher priority, but you're going to hear from police, kind of where they're at in their situation. You're going to hear from community development, you're going to hear from public works. So I don't want to say in any way that this may be the number one priority, and that's fantastic, but maybe other things here that start going, well, I don't know if we can use all this money for that. I'm not saying this is the only way to fund it, but saying that a oversimplified way that if you really wanted to do this, you can do it. There's no doubt. And then you would start getting into, I think, what Matt's touched on. We don't know it today, but obviously we're moving along with Prairie Road Commons. Every day or week that they move a little bit further along on there, it makes us feel a little bit better that that's actually going to come to fruition. And if it's typical of the other projects we have, even if there is some type of incentive agreement to get them here, it's never been in any of the other ones where we give them 100% back of the additional revenue. So we can't guarantee it today, but hopefully before too long, that's far enough along that we can feel comfortable that that'll start being. So other things that will happen, that it's not just, census money isn't the only new money we're counting, that we do have additional other revenues that allow us to do something like this and fill some gaps.
And I do want to say, I know it's a very tough thing to explain on the expense allocation and the road program item. But what that presents, I don't want you to think is a reduction in what our current level of road program would be. That's not what I'm presenting. I wouldn't present something that's going to reduce the current level of what our road program is. There is a way to make that happen and keep the road program current level that we are at, and actually in 4 or 5 years that would actually increase. So it's not that I was going to say we're currently funding 700,000 and I'm going to take 200,000 away to do this. I wouldn't present, it would be presented in a way that level would not change. And we would have that ability to keep the road program the same, not reduce any of that, but still make this work. So I know it's a tough thing to explain because it's a very confusing option, but that option is not in any way to reduce current funding level for our road program.
So let's just be clear, you're obviously a few steps ahead of the board, maybe more than a few, because I anticipate that you have had conversations with Chief and Tony regarding some of their needs. So you're already anticipating what this could look like, and as they present to us, how those numbers will fluctuate.
Yes, and that's why I've presented all of these options, because there may be 1, 2, or 3 that we're going to do based on priorities of the board and the needs of the other departments. So that's why I wanted to present this all, and I wanted to make that clarification on that portion, because that is a significant amount of money, but I would never present something that's going to reduce the current levels of our road program.
And then on a note, we didn't bring it up, the selling of the property at the airport, that is 18 to 20 acres. Okay, 18 to 20 acres. At the moment, we don't have any good comps.
Correct.
So the idea of selling that property with the property available, I know that Weaver's property is right across the street. He's asking owner wants to develop, and then looking at the property right there across the street. So until we actually see something happening near the property that we own, it's not a good compliment, right? So we're just sitting on that. But
Could we temporarily lease that to the club district for soccer fields, baseball fields, for say 5 years or so that can maybe in appreciate in value that could eventually be developed later on?
I believe in prior conversations I've had with the Park District, their difficulty is the level of improvement they have to make it truly playable ground. We currently lease it to a farm. I don't want to speak for them, but my belief based on other conversations would be the investment they would put in to have what would be acceptable turf would be significant enough that they would probably want a longer lease than that.
I think the other two may also be that they're not the business of taking on property and turning it into a park, that they take on park, but they maintain it. So what they get, they the farm park, for example, they wanted it up to par before they took on because they don't have the money to get it where they need to get it. So there's a little of that. Everybody's but it's good concept because I know that there is a need for them in more park space. So we want to also bring this into the conversation center with what space they are able to maintain under the park district, not the village.
I love the idea of a outdoor group.
No, and just
And all that sort of stuff. That's the type of stuff that brings people in. And they're going to come in and they're going to want a restaurant to sit down and have a nice fancy dinner before, they watch Frog Hat play or, whatever, might be, 40-year-old band might be coming in.
You brought back a lot of memories for Walter, right?
I don't want to, Matt, I don't know if you have more to add to this that we're missing, but it sounds like we're at a great starting place. I do want to bring up, I'm having attention deficit for everything. So I should finish my thought. Matt, do you want to add anything in addition to the report?
I do not. Obviously, it was a lot of information. There's a lot of actual attachments to this as well. If there are questions that come up, feel free to email me. And as we have done in the past, the questions and answers will go back to the board as a whole in case there are questions that come up after the fact and been able to digest everything that we just went through. There was a lot of information in a short period of time, and I'm sure there's going to be questions.
One of the things I do want to mention, because I brought it up earlier, was the conversation about making some improvements to the administration side of the building and what that would look like today. So they're over there already with their tape. They're not mapping out their new office space. Chief has been involved over there. I think what Brent just said, you're good with whatever, but I want to make sure it's going to be your local community. You need to make sure that it works for you. But I don't know what the carpet situation looks like and whether we're able to hold off on that. I will remember just because supply and demand. I don't want to put it off when we're not getting it, and now we're behind. But.
Yeah, my understanding, and I'm asking Tony to correct me if I get off track, is the actual carpet, we're still waiting. And our belief is that if we do get it, we can say, hey, go ahead with improvements on the police side, and basically say, just hang on to the material for this side. There may be some, eventually I would assume, maybe some marginal, if anything, remobilization costs, but I don't know that they were going to do it all in one shot anyway. So, but our belief, I think you had Brad look into it, was that, yeah, it's not imminent. We're a few weeks away from even being able to schedule.
Okay. So with that being said, you can't spend money we don't have. We certainly have some money we can spend. But I think that this release money that we're anticipating, I don't want to start full of work, but I'd like to imagine that there's going to be something that's qualified that's going to free up additional dollars in another area that we might be able to cover this project. And so with that being said, I don't know if the rest of the board is on board with that. It's like we're moving in the right direction today without talking about all these other talks. I need, even for the staff that works there, with the state message situation, not big bad state, but big bad state that the ability to be in your office and not, even if something to the balance, even being vaccinated, not kind of my vaccine there, but there's a comfort level of being in your office and face off, and do that stuff. So you don't want to have to wear it. So if we can agree to kind of, I mean, we don't have to go here. We don't have any numbers, but at least the concept of moving down toward getting folks to put up walls, build some offices, and rework.
You can, because I've looked into it, you can do a pseudo-temporary wall. So imagine, if you will, higher quality walls than what they've got in there by way of cubes, but they're floor to ceiling. And at least there's a privacy, and they're at least as sound insulating as, any 2x4 wall that you're going to do. In there, I think the biggest thing that you're going to run into in enclosed space is going to be the HVAC system. That's, the air handling to maintain consistent temperatures in each of the items becomes different control zones. That might be the gotcha that we could get hit with. We don't anticipate how much that could be. So just FYI on that.
No, but I didn't think.
I've done a lot of build outs.
So here's what we do in my office. Yeah. We're all in cubicle. And what they did is we got plexiglass. And so we can take our mask and we basically extend the plexiglass to the height of the wall to about 710, so that we are able to take our masks off if we're in our cubicle and inside with the. I'm just thinking temporary, if anything, it doesn't cost much.
I don't want to go too far down that road, but what I will say is that we've had cases of COVID here in the village in 2 different facilities, that if you talk to the individuals that had it, I would say it's an extreme likelihood, not a certainty, that it was spread in our buildings. Just knowing at the time it happened, other places people went, and in their homes, no one else had it. They really didn't go anywhere else. And I can tell you that we've had in the other facility, you're talking about people that sit probably 20, 25 feet apart from each other. It's the only time they were without masks. We did install into all of our facilities the upgraded system that is, I don't know what it's called, that kills the germ as air goes through there. So it was a case where, you were 25 feet apart in your cubicle, you didn't have to wear a mask. You stood up, put your mask on. It got spread. So I think for the people that are here that are concerned, plexiglass walls don't mean it.
Okay, guys.
What we've experienced is that it's spread here between people that truly are well over 20 feet apart from each other.
Yeah.
So I think from and who knows why? I can't prove it, but.
It's big off. So
And I think the other thing which wasn't touched on, which is for a lot of people, they're equally as valid, even with the existing offices, there is no privacy, because whether it's the walls, whether it's kind of the open space up above with the drop ceiling, I mean, literally, unless you're whispering, the people on the other side hear everything you say. And when you got an environment this tight with HR in there and other things, it's very difficult at times to conduct business. So I think that if we do anything over there, certainly for current use, but certainly when the police go in there, we would want to look at, if you're bringing the construction crews out, what do they have to do for the new space, but also is there something reasonable they could do in the existing private offices that helps out with those. I don't think it would be too difficult to get at least a ballpark estimate, is to have, let's say, whatever, are we talking $100,000, $50,000? I don't know, your point is very valid. I just have to smile as you're saying that. I don't know that it could get any worse than it is today in the offices. They're either, the existing offices, if you want to get comfortable in the open space, you're dying with heat in the summer in those offices because the airflow doesn't get there to cool them down in winter. you're breathing draw.
Well, I'm guessing then the new HVAC system is covered.
Right.
Estimates.
Yeah, I just kind of appreciate your point, but that's what we look at now. You know, it's like,
I was going to say, as you can see my face, that's how hot it is when the door is shut. It just doesn't do anything.
Did Public Works get new HVAC over the last year?
Yeah, that was one of the units.
One unit.
There's more than one out there.
And that was how much, that was running in Duffel.
That was just replacing the exact unit.
$10,000.
I thought a little bit more than that, but it was just replacing the exact unit, not reducting.
Yeah, and we got that as well here at Village Hall. But again, yeah, I don't think it's the unit. I think it's the actual ductwork and ventilation that is the issue more than just the unit. So.
Okay, so, how's that sound?
perfect.
All right. Let's move on. If anybody else has anything else, anybody have anything else? Okay. Let's go to the other report. Frank.
Well, after I stole some other people's items last time, I'm going to refrain from talking about anything related to other departments. The only thing I will add is that we have made an offer for a new part-time deputy clerk that has been accepted, and the start date analysis, June 2nd. So we will have a new individual joining our staff here at Village Hall.
Does that mean you won't be at board meeting? You're out?
No, that does not.
Oh.
But I think we can.
Okay. Well, that's exciting.
Yes, we're very excited. So that's it, unless you have questions for me.
How's that get for fun stockpile?
The latest report I had is it is being hauled out quickly. I think that, I believe, I looked around, the people that probably drive by it more than I do. Is it fair to say it's at least 2% gone from the original?
Yes.
In a matter of weeks, so they certainly seem on track to get it, as much as they're gonna do this summer. And then, the next thing is obviously the big question we've all been waiting for is once that topsoil is removed to the existence and condition of and utility structures that are supposed to be under the dirt. We believe are there, but until you can physically see them and make sure they're there and at the right height and everything. I think that'll be the next step, and then we'll be working with the other parties on, exactly how that gets restored and who's responsible. The topsoil broker will not do the final grading, if you will, to prepare it for seed, so we got to work through some of those.
There's kind of a pile of trees. I don't know if you're planning to mulch those, all of them.
That's up to the village to get rid of. So he just jacked those for us. The possibility that we're gonna use the chipper and chip it up, but we'll see once he's completed.
And I believe today or within the last week, we now have one of the builders out there in the Open North file we refer to, which was the plan.
Yes.
That they're going to, for the lots that are existing out there, they're going to start using, the topsoil on that, which is on the village. So.
It just didn't say that. Like, oh, yeah, I don't know about that.
Right. So that they can access that and start using it.
So you're gonna have the same problem with removing trees on that tile as well?
Maybe, I don't believe it's going to be as much of an issue because it's a much slower use.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it happens.
And I consider your vendor, I don't know if you've gotten, any trustees to respond to the top law, Metro West, Council of Government, fall having, July 22nd. They haven't sent a formal invite yet, but I think we put it out.
Yeah, I know that the few that expressed interest, but I think until we're not quite there yet, we need a formal commitment.
No, I know.
If you can make a commitment, that's great. Yep.
Do you have anybody want in? I think I said.
I think we've got people that, yeah.
That's good.
I love that.
Great. Yeah. I'm excited about it. So
It's good to be entertaining for the rest of you to watch and then you can call.
Oh, that means you're in?
Show you
The
that.
great thing about it is you don't have to go to the
No, the little pitch on that, for anybody who's not familiar with it, that's obviously a Metro West Council government initiative. And unlike a traditional golf outing, I think a lot of people find this better, if you will, because you're going to have elected and appointed officials from, most of the members of Metro West. And if you're familiar with Top Golf at all, you got your little station, but you can wander. And certainly now it's great that we're coming out of the COVID thing, because that was one of the concerns, how much, mingling will be. So it really is a great opportunity to build the relationships, not only with, the other local governmental representatives, but typically there's some representatives, or more from the county and state level as well. So it really is the golf, if you will, really is not the important part. It's the networking opportunities there and building those relationships.
Thank you. Matt?
I do not have anything extra tonight.
Thank you. That was good. We had a good time. Enjoyed your presentation. Walter?
Well, let's see. I'll start with, it wasn't in my report, for tonight. I can actually say I feel more confident than I ever have that they will be opening soon. We finally received the as-built for all the changes to the building. Total of 3,044 pages were delivered. Chris has started reviewing those. The other thing that we're waiting on is, speaking of HVAC, is the exact report for the building. That's underway. That's going to take about 2 weeks, and we'll see what we get the next week. So that's moving along. So things are looking up.
Still have been doing things, or?
I'm still not going to put any dates on it,
Okay.
but things, the light is at the end of the tunnel, and I don't think it's a train.
What is that?
Going on 5 years of just the building, of just the building. No. Someday we can talk about what happened in the interim, but there's active litigation going on with that, so I'm not going to talk about it. Our seasonal code officer started their work on Friday, so Josh will be out and about on the evenings, some evenings during the weekend, on the weekends. And Chris and I also met with Ryan Holmes to go over the protocols for the building permits for the building that we're building in front of the bridge. And I received notification from them yesterday that they'll be coming in with the plan set for the model in the next week or so. That's all I have.
What? Oh, what's the highlight? Happened to you?
I'm going to steal the reports from you, don't talk with
The
it.
attorney, but there's an attorney that contacted you. Was it an annexation agreement?
Oh.
Oh, I don't know if I call that highlight, but anyway.
Well, it's pretty.
We finally had a response from the attorney representing the road group event that we want for Street. So we'll distribute that and hopefully get comments back to them as quickly as we can. But, yeah, that was a long time coming.
And depot is moving along. It looks like the land looks like it's pressed, right? How they're please today.
Oh, well, since you brought it up, permit's ready to go. We're just waiting for the general contractor to provide us their insurance and contractor's registration. We've got everything. We've got the bond, we got the permit fees and everything, but we don't have their registration or insurance. And they're reaching a point where they're going to have to stop because the earthwork is essentially gone. So now they got to start underground or foundation work, and they can't do that without permit.
Oh, maybe that's motivation.
You would think.
Does anybody have any questions for Walter? No?
No, but congratulations to everyone with respect to what's been going on with the development and coming to agreement and the architectural standards and all that other good stuff. I'm sure you were intimately involved in that.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Ryan has to agree to it. So really, they should get a lot of credit. Because obviously they want to build here, that they agreed so quickly with the HOA.
No small task.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, full development, something
Yeah.
happening. Thank you, Walter.
So a couple things, continuing to foster great working relationships with the Sugarville Fire Protection District. Fire Chief Perkins and myself are advancing a number of in-service training topics between our agencies. One of those occurred this past Wednesday. The officers received refresher training on the trauma medical kits that are stored inside the vehicle. An overview with the fire department and the hands-on demonstration occurred with the intervention products that we store. Here in Sugarville, we respond to a number of industrial accidents, farming accidents, and then things that happen in people's homes. Typically, the officers are first on the scene, not always. So having the equipment, knowing how to use it before the fire department gets on the scene is important. Hopefully, we'll save a limb or save a body, save a human being. We're adding chest seals. Those are new devices that are been applied through the military and then also through other major cities. There is a gunshot wound or another stabbing wound to the chest that these seals are now hopefully going to help prevent massive blood loss to occur. So we're doing some purchasing and training on that both. The other thing that transpired a week ago from Monday was, I believe I sent out an email out to everybody as well as an emergency alert to the community about a 15-year-old special needs child that walked away from on Ferry Street. So he wandered off, was gone for about 2.5 hours from his home. And being the vast area that it was in the location, we were very fortunate to utilize the resources that we had and continue to have relationships with the King County Sheriff's Office. Responded with great assistance. They were able to get a drone up in the air for us, and that capability of the drone has thermal imaging. So if there is somebody that is wandering around out in the fields, or hopefully under some bushes, be able to pick up that imagery on the camera. The other thing that we did was we went with a couple of routes was to get a dog in the area, and like that experiences. It's been useful for getting dogs out there as soon as possible and then keeping the officers away so that their scent doesn't interfere with when they start doing the tracking. King County had a bloodhound available. Their dog, I believe his name is Aaron, was slow and steady, tracking along the way, and the flow of a bloodhound versus another type of law enforcement dog that's used, which is very quick and is fired out. But that bloodhound continued to track and locate the young youth hiding under some very thick bushes, and came to the surprise that he was tucked away inside of there. So it was a very nice opportunity for us, and I need to give credit to the fire department and Will Bond Community College police officer as well as the sheriff's office that responded. So there was a team effort, and the Aurora Police Department, a couple of squads go up and down Ferry Street during that time frame too. So, and in the time of need, resources are available, and just blessed to have the relationships that we do have. So kudos to my afternoon shift staff and helping coordinate, and, putting them under the fire, and, even though I'm on the scene, I'm teaching the supervisors, techniques to make sure that we got everything covered. So it worked out really well. Yes.
I got my controller. You signed up? Like the garden. Who else has to get out?
I got it.
Spread the word. It is a good job. It is a good information. You can see what we law. I know that within moments that are going out, multiple Facebook groups where we should show having almost 7 people putting it on the media. It is important. It is a good way to start.
Thank you. And we did have a number of residents as well as individuals that got it. Were driving by and we found them. County OEM was already getting deployed to come to a location before we put the volunteers walk in the field in case we didn't find them. So, but you're right. So it was extremely an eye opener to see the number of people that wanted to come. So.
Do you have a group that someone can be involved with? Say, I want to have on the camera to be involved. How does one go about it?
Right. So there's certain groups that are citizen teams that are involved, and I know the closest one to us is Auburn, but also the countywide one, which gets activated, more than a few times a year. Is a great location to try. We're just a small agency to try to put something together and in here and provide training on a monthly basis. We're going to lose interest on individuals and then make staff and manpower put something together. It's nice to have organizations that are out there.
Anything else, Steve?
No.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Steve? I love you.
I know. I want to talk more about that group though. Offline.
Sure.
Excellent. Thank you. Tony.
Just want to, we're still working as part of some of the information that will be forward later this year. The CNAP payment program, the data collection is complete. So that is still moving forward, and I'm anxiously awaiting our information on that so that we can figure out our payment management program and resources that we need to stay on top of that. And then the 2021 road program is currently underway, and I just do want to mention that every time I get an update on that, I do put it on the website, so it is available every time we get an update. So, that's all I have at this point.
Any update on the 47, any engineering or any calculations you can share on the pricing of 47?
No, it's still in phase 2 engineering, and still reviewing some information on it. There was some discussion a couple weeks ago about some drainage information, and requested information from IDOT, and we're working with Trotter and Associates to take a look at that.
You know, there's no right they want to start from 2023. Do you know where they fall on their contract with engineering? And there will be an impact on their part of that in the results.
I don't actually foresee construction starting in 2023 because they're still in phase 2 engineering.
Okay.
So until phase 2 is completed, that and then they have, they're working on property acquisition. So I don't think it's going to actually start construction in 2023. And yes, we do have to get the Burlington Northern worked out because as all active railroads, they don't shut down, even though roads we can shut down or change lanes or whatever. That doesn't work for the railroad, and that is a guaranteed freight route. And so Burlington has to get certain trains through there every single day to meet their contractual requirements. So basically, as happens with all railroad relocations, they have to have a bypass built to keep the railroad running so that they can come back and rebuild the railroad bridge to the final part and then transfer the traffic back, rail traffic back to that bridge. So that is rather extensive work just in the railroad bridge itself.
Does anybody have any questions for Tony? All right. Moving on to trustee report. Heidi? I was actually fully understood from the presentation. So, you did an awesome job. I think it helps Heidi that's right, that you're kind of coming off of all of this too. Yeah, it is now looking at it. Thank you. Anything else? Mike?
Yeah, I had a couple of prepared remarks and comments, but in light of time, it's 9:05. I'll hold that off until next time. Nothing urgent, other than to congratulate Matt for being part of the team here, and the general comment to the community with the volunteers and the applicants. High praise to the candidates that came in. We had a great selection of individuals to choose from. Certainly, and I think everyone feels that way. And I'm looking forward to opportunities to, it didn't work out for this time. Let's find some other ways to keep motivated and involved in other areas of government.
Excellent segue.
Yeah.
So because of having such qualified applicants, as President Conan alluded to earlier, we're starting a town center.
I don't know.
Like a town center committee. And there are some of the applicants that applied for the open trustee seat that we're in communication with. President Conan is in communication with, as we try and utilize their skill set for this town center committee to where we can organize and focus our efforts as we move forward with this committee. I don't know what you want to say about it, but it's such the scope of it is so big that I think that it's a fantastic idea to try and move things along so we don't have to have board meetings every Tuesday night. If we can meet up a separate night to discuss things, to bring those things, discussion items to the board for further discussion as we kind of work through. Very, very talented folks. Talking to get on. But Brad,
I do have an hour-long prepared speech. So settle in here. First, I just want to say thank you to President Coleman and to the board for giving me this amazing opportunity to work with everybody. Really looking forward to the way that the group is growing, the direction it's heading, and beyond excited to be part of it. And I also just want to say from now on here to serve the pleasure of the residents of Chicago. Thank you.
President Ford, we don't have Brian, right? We don't have Brian and Jamie as well. Okay. So last time we met, I told you I was attending the Women's Council that was a good event. It was well attended. It seemed like 60-something people there, low 60s, but they were the same Charles, Geneva, Batavia, Auburn, and Chicago were there to discuss what's happening with the community. And I got to meet the new mayor of St. Charles, Laura, so that was FedEx, which is wonderful, very nice. I think all mayors presented an opportunity that day because I had Mayor Walter say what's going on with our boundary. So it was very exciting that I was meeting with him on Thursday to hopefully discuss that and bring that back to administration and let that be our mission. So fingers crossed for me that that worked out for both parties.
Which means that.
Over?
Okay.
Yeah. That was staff in our regular scheduled Tuesday meeting. So up to speed on everybody's department and what's going on, which is great. We did have an EDC meeting, internal EDC meeting, and not with the economic development corporation. Again, this is our own internal with staff, so Brent, Walter, myself, Danny on that call. Sometimes Tony, depending on what's happening, but and also the last one was Charles. We're trying to figure out to present to the board the findings that Charles is in Alabama, and he said he wanted to come up here. So he does come up here. We're trying to get him to bring the information he has also to our business. So our Chamber of Commerce, the EDC, and how do we get information out there for that? I know that Brent is kind of test marketing information, and we're trying to schedule a meeting. I think my check with Ian before the night. I think we're narrowing it down, but with James Furniture. So if any of you have ever been to James Furniture, small example of what's happening in our community. He has no space in that building. It's very tight. And so what was fascinating is the information that we got from that site, how much room in terms of is closed within that market. So we're going to take that to him. This might be a great example of how something takes a business and moves up. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it's something that we're actively trying to do behind the scenes, right? So that's one of them. I did ask Trustee Harris to chair this new committee called the Town Center Committee and utilizing applicants that put in the trustee position. There is one particular applicant that is really very qualified and is very excited. So that actually said, I think this position is a better fit for me than even being on there. So that was nice to hear. And so we are, to your point, trying to utilize all applicants in different ways throughout the week. There still are 2 open positions that need to be filled that I'm hoping to get together with some places that is also the chair or to discuss. The board, I don't know if people will get input into what the best fit is over there. Losing Jamie, what kind of homes that creates and how do we fill that. So that's ongoing, and I did want to go to full session so we were there. But I still want to bring paragraphs on that. What else? And we also have a group tax. I had a meeting on Thursday that Allison was set up with our group tax body. So that is on Thursday, meeting with our local stuff. So the parties for presidential different library, township, and will be on that call. Meeting with landowner on Friday. So that is the Broad Hope. We have a lunch meeting with Ron, and hopefully we're excited about selling this property as I am about to sell. Hopefully there's a meeting of the mind with that. And I did ask Trustee Walter if he would be part of the GC meeting. He internal right now with our staff and get him on the seat. So he's agreed to do that. So what I'm all we're still showing that lending on to figure out what other things we're doing as trustees working with some of the applicants and how that we like. I hate to start something and then well that didn't work. But I guess there is some trial and error. Like you want to put our mind behind what we know what the solution is. I'm most excited about the town center. So I think there's nothing that's going to fall apart now. It's just kind of, there might be some restructuring and building within it, but that's one thing.
Right.
I told you that multiple times. I am meeting, well, can I tell, he has accepted?
Sure meeting.
Insider information is special. I asked you to be, if you would participate in this, and he hasn't done. But what I would tell you is one, staff, and Walter is probably going to do too. But with that being said, we're not trying to give staff too much work, but this does alleviate a huge discussion from our board meetings being 3-4 hours long. They can figure some stuff out. I plan on attending, I'm not going to round it up with the audience and what they're doing, but yeah, and then Sean will present after to the board to give you an update. But we're going to keep that moving, and if at any time you need a sub in, which you can attend, we're really then we can do other. That's all I have in my big plan. Oh, did you want to do anything?
No, you also have an EDC.
Oh, you have an EDC tomorrow? That's right, 8 a.m. I will be there. Who's my phone? It could be something connected to the village. Properly. Yes, we do have an EDC meeting tomorrow, which Sean has as the chair. As you all know, I am being the chair on the EDC committee. I think that the EDC really should be remember clear for those who are after my opinion, should be another being on the board and driving that ship versus the village staff and driving that organization. So I'm just going to take that. I'm happy to do, member base, board member if I need to be, but I certainly don't want to be a lead when I'm trying to stay in my lane here. So yeah, looking forward to how that shapes out. Thank you. That's all I have. I hope for the evening. Thank you all. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Oh, wait a minute.
You have one more public comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Brent. Are there any public comments out there? Thank you, Linda, for hanging till the end at 9:15. We appreciate it. Chad, do you have any? So for all of you that don't know, I only know because I spoke to them, but Chad wasn't at the village board. So whenever your applications, Chad was one of them. So thank you for coming. I know a couple sitting in those chairs for one. It was a long meeting. We appreciate it. Brent, thank you for keeping me on task. Airport report again. It's on here, but they are not meeting until very early in August. We have no need to go into the closed session tonight. And well, we're moving on now. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right. First, I should show it to the second. Roll call, please, Allison.
Trustee Shometh.
Aye.
Trustee Heron.
Aye.
Trustee Lindy.
Aye.
Trustee Bonnie. Trustee White. Absent. And Trustee Walter. That's it.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.